No, it's supposed to be here. Good morning. I understand that there are some some technical difficulties in the sound system, so I'm going to ask everybody to speak loudly and carry a big stick. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from September 13th. If there are no corrections or amendments, I'll ask for a motion. And seconded. All in favor? Aye. And that moves us to the first item on the agenda, which is to deal with a date issue that has been caused by the movement of the November board meeting by 1 week to acknowledge Election Day, and a variance that was intended to expire at the meeting date. So if I could have a motion to make that correction.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? And that moves us to the report on mental health and at H&H, and I believe Dr. Raju, and we have Dr. Raju here with us this morning. Welcome, Doctor.
Oh, good morning, everyone.
Oh, Commissioner Pott.
So, Dr. Raju and myself are here today to report on our progress since the last board meeting on our production of inmates both for follow-up care and to clinic. I think we've made great progress and moved the dial in comparison to our discussions at the last meeting, which I found very disappointing. But what we truly understand now is how we measure and what do we in comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, so to speak. And I think once we've designed the system and understand how we count, non-produce and produce and those kinds of variables, we've made real progress. And I think for all of us that we're very happy with the progress, even though we have much more to go. Dr. Raju?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you. And I want to thank Commissioner Pond for working with us. I just want to send a very clear message that access to care is a collective responsibility of both the healthcare and the DOC. And this is a joint priority, and you have my assurance that we will work very, very closely with the Commissioner, make sure that the access to care is given to everybody in appropriate time. So I just want to talk to the board today and say this is a collective responsibility. We want it together, and we'll work together to make this better for our inmates. Thank you.
I just want to thank you both for commenting on this. So the board has met, and we'll hear more today about, I guess, but just want to say that I and the board appreciates the seriousness with which both of you are and your organizations are approaching this, and we'll have some more discussion now. But we can see some progress, and it's because of concerted activity. More to be done, and I'll have some comments after the report. But I appreciate your coming today. Thank you, and appreciate your comments, Commissioners.
So last time we were here, the board had requested specifically they wanted updates on transportation. So as we stated last time, we do have 3 dedicated buses that are getting individuals to specialty clinic. They're getting there on time, and they are getting their appointments, and they are being seen, which is very exciting for all of us. we've really had a concerted effort looking at production and getting everyone access to medical care and their follow-ups, specifically over the last month. We have dedicated a chief specifically to look at this issue, a chief that's working specifically on production, especially clinics, and another that works on medical and mental health follow-up. We have been able to see improvement. And something else that's been very helpful to us to understand is how scheduling kind of plays into that. So in our combined discussions, like I had talked last time we had met, we had talked about those huddle meetings and how we really have that good discussion right at the beginning of the tour about how many individuals can we see and what does that need to look like. So we've really been able to find, we're working towards getting better ground, but we've really been able to look at that scheduling and see how it works together and making sure we get people seen to clinic. So we're very excited with the progress we're making. We'd like to continue these very specific strategies because we see that it's getting people the services that they need in a way, and I think all of us are very excited about the progress we're making.
Just to add, to recognize in particular Chief Murphy and Commissioner Pont for really taking patient production as a renewed priority. The real push began the last week of September. So in your access report, you won't really see a change in the numbers, but with sustained effort, we expect October report to reflect that. Actually, by the second week of the effort, this was just last week, we've seen the number of people who are scheduled and requested to come to clinic go up. And most significantly, that the reason that people aren't coming to clinic because of escort is going down. So both of those directions are positive.
Just like to make a comment on that. I mean, I think one can trace as H&H has done over the past 6 months, the decrease in production to changes in the escort policy. Efforts to improve production in the context of that continuing process, which requires escorts for all activity and closes down movement in the facilities, can be successful in the short run, but are not likely to be long-term successful because it's just very hard to maintain a higher level of that extra activity when you're taking it from someplace else. So I just urge the departments to look going forward, or maybe report to us on reinstituting non-escort movement where that's possible.
Yes, good morning. So I'd just like to, you're right, we've looked at that as well. So that's why Monday, I believe it's November 7th, we're going to as much non-escorted movement in our facilities as possible. There's always be some portion of the population that will need to be escorted, but the vast majority of individuals will be unescorted going to program services, including clinic appointments.
That's it. Thank you. We move now to a DOC report on the restart units.
Thank you all. We wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about restart units, particularly because the last time we spoke about these units, we had just started them up we had piloted them in GMDC and had an initial success in GRVC. Apologize a little on the weather, but in either case, wanted to take a little bit of time now that we've had several months running these. The first full-time restart unit opening in September of last year. So with a year into that program, we wanted to give an update and are very happy to report that we've seen a lot of positive changes as a result of those restarts. To give all of you a sense, what we did was we took our 14-point agenda, realized that broad department changes were not going to come easily, so focused our attention on making those changes within a specific facility. And more than that, focused on specific housing units. The fundamental components of those restarts were essentially to make as many physical infrastructure changes as we could, starting with the fact that we did have to just change aesthetically the look of the housing unit, ensure that the doors were working, ensure that mechanical errors were fixed, to provide both a sense of safety to the officers, but also to provide us with some confidence that whatever we were putting into effect in terms of policy would be followed and not hindered by the physical infrastructure. The second was to empower the unit managers, specifically not only identify people within the facility, a group, a changed team to ensure consistency across each of the restarts, but also unit managers who took care of specific divisions of the facility. And as restarts came online, were all monitored, trained, and supervised in the same way. We stated up officers and supervisors to provide stability and increase our ownership of the facilities. We also used a new housing and classification system to identify and mix inmates as we move them back into these restarted units. And we created an orientation for each of the inmates where we had the officers, the captains, and the inmates participate in. So as they walked into new restarted units, there was a sense of empowerment both to the officers, but a fair sense of expectation provided to the inmates. So everyone heard it on the same day. They understood what the rules were. They understood what the expectations were. We increased programming dramatically across the department, starting from less than 45 minutes a day of offered programming to, in these restarted units, 5 hours of available programming to each of the people in those units. And we also gave them incentives, created different incentive blocks so that the punishment and reward had more gradations, so that smaller infractions could result in smaller punishments, but also good behavior resulted in incentives, regardless of whether or not that was extra rec time, more visit days, or even family visit days for the entire housing unit. Critically important to all of this was putting it all together in a methodical fashion. We are, in some ways, kind of wish we could move faster, but we have been basically at first started off with a 3.5, 4 weeks at a time to kind of do all of this with one unit. We sped that up. We are currently finished with GRVC and moved on to AMKC. Within AMKC, we're trying to hit a target of every 2.5 weeks to start up a restart unit, which is faster than we did before, but still, just to give you all a sense, a bit of the timing of what we do and how that, in trying to put a methodical approach to it, it can be a bit slow, but still moving with a lot of progress. And I think it's important to note that in these units, we've had dramatic successes. Overall, the model facility violence is down by over 70% when compared to other similar units. We compared the expected versus actual. And the expected, we're basically taking a look at the same housing units, the same type of classification before we did the restarts. In the uses of force in GRVC, we had 72% decreases from what was expected in terms of just use of force. We've only had 94 total within all of GRVC's restarted units. In AMKC, we've started 14 different cell units and only had 2 uses of force. Assaults on staff are also down by 82%. And while a horrible statistic, because no one would want any assault on staff or a slashing on staff, those are dramatic decreases from what we had seen before in similar units. In addition, I think it's important to note that some of these units have gone hundreds of days without any incident of any type of criteria, whether assault on staff, a use of force, a slashing, anything. At some point in GRVC, we had one unit that had gone 225 days. Currently in AMKC, we have 14 units that are open. 8 of those units have not had an incident since they've started. 3 of those have gone over 120 days without any incident whatsoever. The officers feel more empowered. The officers feel more safe. These are things that we're conducting with pulse surveys as well. So we aren't just going by the numbers, which are important, I think, but also to get a sense from both inmates and officers on what they feel. In those units, particularly in taking pulse surveys and understanding what their concerns are, their remarks about their safety, the remarks about the ability to handle their own situation, empowered to make decisions and supported by their captains and tour commanders, are all positive returns we've gotten from these restart units. Again, this is not something that will come quickly. We have simply gone through 2 facilities right now, are continuing to finish up AMKC. We've started that effort in GMDC where our young adults are as well. And I think it's important to note that for us, this is a combination of efforts that takes the staffing into account, the inmates into account, and the housing management into account at the same time, not leaving any behind and trying to mix them all at the same time. So wanted to give you all an update on where we stood with that and at least offer up some time for any questions you may have on those units.
Recently, but I've been to 2 of these units, and they're very impressive in terms of the tone and the mutual respect that you feel when you're there. The people want more programs, but they are filled with programs, and I just want to applaud the department for taking their program and moving it forward.
And I just want to add, I just want to take this moment to say thank you. I think the move on Restart and the outcomes are really solid. And I think we should take a moment and acknowledge that and appreciate that. The question I have is, what have you learned? What has the department learned about Restart that could be implemented throughout the department and shared with other jurisdictions in terms of corrections?
Well, I think you both get good lessons and bad lessons. I think one of the issues that we're facing and we want to make sure is sustainment. Obviously, there's a lot of attention and focus on these restarts and something that we have to kind of take very seriously, but sustaining that and making sure that those steady officers will retire, they'll move. You'll have to retrain and keep that consistency and leadership, people to buy into kind of what this took. So that's, I think, a critical lesson for us as a department as we move forward with any program. I think in other things, I think the idea of empowering the officer to know the inmates in there has been a critical lesson for us. Moving them in at the same time so everyone felt they were on the same page as they moved in through restarts. And little things, simply the technology of just kind of putting in the TVs with the kind of AM, FM receivers to kind of make sure that there was a quieter kind of area for people has created a better sense of, lessening any perception of I hear, not the word chaos, but just, too much noise and too much kind of distraction going on. So those are a couple of different things.
Yes, just to add to that, also Jeff touched on it, was really empowering the correctional officer. Over time, that authority was deteriorated, right? So at some point, correctional officers just were instructed, for lack of a better term, to, if there's a problem, call the captain. So that really didn't help the officer resolve any issues, right? If you just call the captain. So now we allow the correctional officer to have that authority to resolve issues. So they have the confidence in themselves to resolve issues, but it also, the inmates see that the officer's there to help them. I have a problem, they're not just going, shove me off to somebody else. They're the ones on the floor dealing with my issue as the inmate is perceived, and the officer actually has helped me. So, it's a mutual benefit there, right? The officer gets empowered to run the housing unit, and the inmate sees them as a respectable authority figure who's going to take care of issues as they arise.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Thank you very much. Very impressive. We now move to the public comment period. Do I have a list here? One moment. Oh, thanks. That's it. Mark Cranston.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mark Cranston, and I am the warden of the Middlesex County Jail in New Jersey. I was formerly first deputy commissioner at Rikers and served in the agency for over 25 years. I stand before you today as an advisor to President Elias Hussamuddin and the over 8,000 men and women of COBA, and it is my honor to speak before you today on their behalf. I want to start off by congratulating everyone in this room for their role in moving forward a progressive agenda to reduce recidivism, improve conditions of confinement, and reduce the number of mentally ill patients who are warehoused in jails. I come here today understanding and agreeing with where you want to go. However, I know that in order to achieve great things, you must have a strong foundation to stand on, and Rikers does not have that foundation. Given this harsh reality, why is it the priority of this board and the administration to be the first in the nation to eliminate punitive segregation for 19 to 21-year-olds? As Commissioner Pont recently stated in an Our Time press interview, no one in the country is even trying this. They are reducing their reliance, but no one's saying I'm going to eliminate it. Well, I submit to this board that maybe that's for good reason. It seems to me that all the other correction experts in the country have figured out that eliminating it probably isn't a good idea. Using it only when absolutely necessary, in the least restrictive manner possible, and for the shortest duration possible. These are the cornerstones of the recent guidelines put forth by the U.S. Justice Department, and I believe this should be our near-term strategy as we rebuild the foundation necessary to operate a safe jail. Only then can we reach beyond these guidelines and lead the nation. If we continue down the current path, it would seem that you're more interested in touting that we are first in something than you are at creating safe jails. We must pay attention to the data. It's definitive. We shouldn't be gambling with people's lives just so this board and administration can claim to have a nation-leading strategy, because strategies are irrelevant when you have no hope of successfully implementing them. What this board is doing, while well-intentioned, is trying to drive a car that has 2 flat tires and no gas, and insisting the goal is to win the Indy 500. As an outsider, it's easy to see why this is happening, because while each of you has expertise in your own domain, not one of you ever served as a correction officer. How ludicrous would it be to have an oversight body over a hospital that did not have a single doctor or nurse on it? Therefore, we are asking this board to consider requiring that amongst its members, there is at least one member who has significant uniform correction experience and at least one member who was formerly incarcerated, so that you can ensure you have the full spectrum of expertise and experience to carry out this important work. COBA will no longer sit idly by and hope you can work this out sensibly with the administration. We are not a roadblock to reform, but you are putting the cart before the horse, because many of the things you fixated on and are about to implement are contrary to immediate safety. Folks, the problems faced at Rikers are completely solvable. There are examples around the nation of jails and prisons safely reducing the use of segregation. At Middlesex County, working in collaboration with the Variance Institute of Justice, we reduced punitive segregation from 7% of our average daily population to under 2%. We did this as a collective commitment at the jail and in an effort to never let a third party or outside body dictate how it would be done. We worked collectively with advocates, custody, and medical staff to make sure we had a fundamental understanding of their concerns so as to avoid any potential unintended consequences of what we were contemplating. And then we implemented it incrementally so as to ensure a safe and orderly transition. COBA is ready to provide its expertise and to jointly plan and enact reform. We are on board, but this must be done in a coordinated fashion with clear focus on the foundational elements required. Stop thinking of us as a hindrance and instead inject our expertise into this process. I will contact each of you to meet with you and share the officer's perspective and to provide you with an alternative solutions as you deliberate these important issues. I encourage you to embrace the new stance COBA is taking and to never forget that if you fail to build the foundation, your gains will be illusions, only to fall apart like a house of cards at the slightest gust. Our inmates and staff deserve better, and it is the only way to ensure we actually make the progress we all so badly desire. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you.
Kelsey Diavola.
Hello, my name is Kelsey Diavila. I'm the Jail Services Social Worker at Brooklyn Defender Services. Brooklyn Defender Services has serious concerns about the ever-increasing number of restrictive units sprouting up throughout the department, many of which we suspect violate the board's minimum standards. Our suspicions were sadly confirmed in the board's September 29, 2016 letter to the department, which describes an ad hoc solitary confinement unit at West facility. Time and again, the department have come before the board seeking leave to create yet another restrictive unit, purportedly to house the most challenging people in the system. We were told enhanced supervision was a necessary tool to reduce solitary confinement and house the most difficult to manage individuals. When we were told that ESH wasn't good enough, the overrides to limits on solitary confinement were a must for some people. Then for young people, a new secure unit was the cure. Then we learned that administrative segregation units had been established and were often locked down. All that on top of traditional solitary confinement in the being and very restrictive conditions and enhanced restraints unit. Now, here we are again having the same conversation. Even worse, this time the department didn't even engage the board from the beginning. They had to be issued in violation to begin this conversation again. We urge the board to more closely monitor existing restrictive units, regularly report on conditions and due process, and be proactive in enforcing the minimum standards throughout the system. The board should not grant any variances permitting continued expansion of restrictive units around the system. We are disturbed that the department has publicly celebrated and taken credit for reductions in solitary confinement while flouting city law by running ad hoc solitary confinement units in which was intended to be a contagious disease isolation unit. Even worse, the board's September 29, 2016 letter describes that people are placed in the unit without due process. According to the letter, some people have been subjected to 23-hour isolation purportedly as a means of protection, and it is noted that people with serious mental illness have been isolated there. As noted in the board's letter, conditions for people housed in these units are in direct violation of the board's minimum standards. We applaud the board for issuing the department a notice of violation related to conditions in West facility and for doing so publicly. In your letter, you recommend that the department review each individual's placement on the unit and alternative housing options, and the establishment of due process for placement in the unit. We urge the board to go much further. The board should reject the department's request for a continuing variance that would allow them to isolate the individuals indefinitely in solitary confinement and deny them essential services and meaningful human interaction. Although the department claims that its request that people will not be housed in 23-hour isolation at West facility, this is contrary to the findings reported in the board's letter and asserted without evidence or details about how much lockout they receive or their access to meaningful interactions with other people. We believe it is imperative that there be transparency in what we are talking about, indefinite solitary confinement. The variance request is dated October 7, 2016. However, once again, interested parties did not receive the variance until the weekend preceding the meeting. The use of these variances allow the department to effectively do whatever they want without engaging with the board through rulemaking has resulted in an oversight process that is, in a word, farcical. The units should be closed immediately and the people housed in isolation at West, for reasons outside of infectious disease precautions, should be rehoused in other housing areas in compliance with minimum standards. It is unacceptable that people are housed in isolation without due process, and it is patently unconstitutional that they are denied access to law library and congregate religious services as described in the letter. It is particularly urgent that young people, people with safety concerns, and people with serious mental illness be removed from the unit at once and precluded from placement in any future unit of similar character. These exclusions exist in the minimum standards for well-documented reasons and should be maintained regardless of the name or location of any unit that resembles solitary confinement. The department's October 7, 2016 letter acknowledges that under minimum standard 1-07, any denial of congregate religious services must be based on specific acts committed by the prisoner during the exercise of his or her religion. However, the department doesn't claim that this is the case for each individual they have isolated at West, to whom they have denied this constitutionally protected right. Instead, they simply assert that they believe that they are unable to provide these services without risking the safety and security of the facility. This explanation simply does not meet the standard, which is narrowly tailored for good reason, and which should be enforced. Although the department claims that people in West facility will be provided constitutionally protected access to law library material through kiosks, it does not say when access will be ensured. Considerations like this one are exactly the reason for the rulemaking process, to ensure that people's fundamental rights will not be violated in a unit before they are placed there. It is contrary to foundational notions of justice to deprive the accused access to the law. No one in custody, particularly pretrial detainees, should be denied such crucial resources even for one day, which may happen to be crucial one for the trajectory of their case. The department rights of religious and law library services. Rather than eliminate those services, the department is committed to providing them in a safer, more secure setting. This suggests that the department may have misconceptions about its constitutional obligations to the people in its custody. It is our position that such fundamental rights cannot simply be eliminated. The board must do everything in its power to ensure adequate access to congregate religious services and law library, including by evaluating the use of kiosks elsewhere in the system. Finally, the due process procedure the department states it intends to develop is woefully inadequate. The department states that it needs 60 days to develop the procedure and proper forms. We again point to the rulemaking process as the appropriate setting and time frame to undertake this effort with input from the community and the board. We support provision of written notice and an in-person hearing as part of any due process. However, the department provides no information about what would be required to justify placement except for his/her safety or the safety of others. Also missing is an appeal process following any finding at a hearing. Placement reviews every 90 days with the option to be present only every other review is truly a staggering interval. 3 months in solitary confinement is more than 6 times the period that isolation is permitted under international human rights standard. While the overall population in solitary confinement has dropped, it would be an astounding reversal to establish an intermediate solitary confinement unit, even if only to house a small number of people. In the case of individuals with reported safety concerns, the department's request is also vague. It is unclear on what basis a determination would be made to isolate an individual for their own safety. Nothing in the department's variance request indicates that placement in the unit is consensual for someone with safety issues. In other jurisdictions, similar isolation for protection schemes have led to disproportionate long-term isolation among LGBT and gender nonconforming people with disabilities and others. Evidence in the context of PREA suggests that individuals' report about their own perceived safety are one of the best indicators of their actual safety, and such guide housing determinations. BDS opposes any attempt to isolate people over their objection based on a claim that it is for their own protection. If the department wishes to create new restrictive units that violate existing minimum standards, they are required to seek changes in the minimum standards. These changes should be requested via rulemaking and not variances after the fact. The board's September 29, 2016 letter references a proposal, apparently from the department, which may describe this new unit in greater detail, but no such document has been circulated. Under such a time as the rulemaking process has been completed with input from the community and people in the jails, units that violate the law should not be permitted to operate, and people must be rehoused and afforded the minimum standards. We would appreciate if the board publicly clarified that corrective action has been taken to ensure that the rights of individuals presently and previously housed in such units are not violated. To then go on about the young adult plan, the proliferation of restrictive units impacts young adults in particularly significant ways. While the department celebrates what they describe as an end to solitary confinement for 18 to 21-year-old young adults, we instead feel concerned by the dizzying array of units left in its place. The department may now place young adults in the secure unit, the transitional restorative unit, known as TRUE, and the second chance housing unit, are seeking extensions of enhanced supervision housing placements, and have established yet another solitary-like unit situated in a former solitary confinement block for assessing young adults. This last unit appears to have been born out of the board's conditions for continuing solitary confinement. Under the present arrangement, a young adult may have difficulty in the jail or entangled in an endless web of restrictive units. In one conservative scenario, a young person involved in an incident would spend at least 28 days in the assessment unit, then be transferred to the secure unit for 28 days in each of its 3 phases, and then to an indeterminate stay in ESH. Even if, as we advocate, ESH placements were ended for this group, this individual would have spent a minimum of 4 months in restrictive units. We urge the board to enforce the minimum standards and prevent the department from creating yet another unit with less than 14 hours per day of lockout, limited due process, and lengthy stays. Similarly, the board should reject the department's request to extend the variance permitting young people to be placed in ESH. Young people were expressly excluded from this setting because the board recognized the possible harm that such extended time in cell has on adolescent brain development. The department initially requested the option to utilize ESH as an option while they opened Secure. Secure is now operational, and as such, there is no further basis for the department's failure to comply with existing minimum standards, which preclude young adults from this setting. If any extension of the variance is granted, the board should also extend the various conditions that were adopted with the variance when it was initially granted in July. In addition, we urge the board to take specific action regarding the needs of any young adult who are housed in the unit and generally to more closely monitor the conditions in the unit. The last report on ESH issued by the board was published in April 2015, and since that time, advocates and others have raised concerns time and again about a range of issues. Placements in ESH appear to be indeterminate. The last report from the department regarding ESH showed that not a single person was released following an evaluation during the period. Due process must be meaningful and substantive and should be monitored. Similarly, it appears that there are additional limitations on people's visits while in ESH are being imposed as a matter of course rather than on the basis of individualized assessment as required under the minimum standards. BDS and others have also raised concerns repeatedly about the lockout schedule in ESH. The rotating AM-PM schedule results in 24-hour lock-ins every other day. This amounts to solitary confinement, should be stopped, and would be a relatively straightforward operational change. For young adults and ESH specifically, we are concerned about reports that time in school is being deducted from out-of-cell time. This practice is exactly contrary to the mission the department has claimed and is pursuing, to engage young adults in healthy programming and improve behavioral outcomes. If a young person is interested in attending school...
Excuse me, I'm going to have to ask you to sum up.
Okay,
You've
yeah,
been
my
up there
last
quite-
line here. So whatever the language department uses, there is no hiding that any other approach is simply punitive and is just, destined to fail. We must move beyond the continuum of punitive response with limited access to books in children's cells and hold their drive against them. Thank you.
Thank you. Al Craig.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a correction officer. I stayed up for the whole weekend, 3 days, trying to write something to fit into 2 minutes. Then I said, you know what? I'm not going to even do that. Last time we had this meeting, I was wondering why the department did not speak out and answer a lot of your questions. Then I recall that one time I came here, they said, listen, don't cause any problems. When you ask, sir, why is it that these people were locked in and didn't use the phone? I was upset. And the reason why I was upset is because my brother died in Brooklyn House, right? I wish he would have got a call saying that he was safe. I wish my mother would have got a call saying he was safe. Our job is security. Security is our job. I came with this speech. I was going to talk about the black robe of silence, how you sentence people to these long terms, these young people. I was going to talk about how these high bells are holding hostage. I was going to talk about how the schools pretty much do the straight school to prison pipeline. I was going to talk about all of that. How nobody says these kids have mental health issues till they come to jail. How they are adolescents in jail, but adults before they get to jail. But then I started thinking about, what about safety? All these programs that you asked them to put in place, they can't work without safety. We have about 12 inmates in jail right now that have caused millions of dollars of damage, millions, in manpower hours, destruction of city property, and we have nowhere to put them. And I'm sitting here and I'm pissed off, I am angry by the fact that these people aren't able to answer the truth and tell the truth about what's going on because they're told, don't speak out. Don't speak out. Don't make this thing not polite. This thing is not supposed to be polite. We begged you, we pleaded to have these type of forums which officers, 9,000 members we represent, and we begged you to have public hearings to hear us out. You are violating your charter and it's not true when you say you hear our complaints. Our complaints is not to beat, harass, do anything to inmates because our families are the ones that's locked up. When you riding a bike down your brand new bike lanes on your way to get your $7 cup of coffee in these neighborhoods, you know who you'll see? Me, because I live in these so-called ghettos or gentrification areas or whatever you want to call it. I am pissed off. For the last 3 years I've come here and all I've heard you say is depict us as criminals, as beating up kids And you know when you sentence them, when your peers sentence them, you know what happens? They come back there crying and they fall in our arms. And we tell them it's going to be all right, even though it's not. When they come back from court, the young man that died after 3 years on Rikers Island, it wasn't our fault. We wanted him to go. But your peers kept him there. Your peers kept him in jail. It wasn't, you know how hard it is? I come from a very poor family. You know how hard it was when my brothers went to jail, how we had to scrape up bail money? But you keep giving them these high bails, and then you throw them to us, and then you say, well, hey, wait a minute. You know, Rikers Island killed them. No, knowing that a kid has to go to court every freaking month, every freaking day, and don't have a chance to go home, that's the issue. All of you maybe got good intentions. I don't even doubt that you do. But you can't educate them without safety. This young lady got up here and she spoke and she talked about programs and denying them programs. But guess what? If these people are getting hurt, how are they going to have a program? You talked about the embarrassment of kids, of the people being searched in Brooklyn House. Mister, I strip searched my own brother. Do you think that gave me pleasure? No, it did not. But I had to do it to make sure that he didn't hurt anybody else. And it pisses me off that you depict us this way. You sat here and said Black Lives Matters to us. And you talked to a whole staff of black people saying that. Shame on you. I've sat here for 3 years and heard this nonsense. And maybe you have good intentions. Maybe you thought about all of this stuff. And I'm sure you have. But next time you're in the mayor's office, tell them to give these kids these deferments so they can go to school when they have dyslexia and when they have these learning disorders. Don't let them come to jail to find out that they have mental health issues. Catch them before. Your program, I believe you have, I forget the name of your program. Yes, one of my brothers is a graduate from it. And it's a good program. Do you know what happened? He came out of jail, got his GED, and guess what? He's retired. He never came back to jail again. We need more programs like that. Stop thinking that we don't want this to work. We do want it to work. We want it to work, but it has to be safe for every kid. That kid that went to court for 3 years, guess what? Was it safe for him? Was it safe? Go back to your peers the next time you're at one of these hoity-toity cocktail parties. Go and tell them. Give them affordable bail so they don't come to jail. Give them their services. Give them their services so they don't have to be diagnosed as having a mental health issue while they're incarcerated. So that no other parent will get a damn call that my parent got, your son is dead. That's what we want you to do. But our goal is to keep them safe. That's our goal. Now, I don't know if this is going on, maybe your egos will mess with you, or maybe this is not the most politically correct thing to do, or whatever, but I'm tired. Well, every time I go to the hospital and see an officer getting his arm stitched for being cut, or a young boy, have you ever talked to a young boy who's bleeding through his face and crying for his mother, and you got to tell him everything's going to be all right while you can see his teeth? Guess what? I have. Have you ever seen a guy take a razor out of his rectum, and you ask why he's strip searching him? Because they hide them in the rectum. They hide them at the bottom of their feet. They hide them in the foreskins of their penises, under their genitals. That's where they hide weapons. And yes, it's embarrassing. Like I was embarrassed for my brother when I strip searched him. But I had to do it. And it might make you uncomfortable what I'm saying. I don't get no pleasure out of strip searching anybody. I stayed up for 3 days trying to come here and speak eloquently to you. But I'm tired. I'm tired. I do not want to have to go to someone's door and say they was murdered in jail, and we're getting that far. I do not want to hear another parent get a call saying that their kid, like my mother did, is dead in Brooklyn House. So when I go to Brooklyn House, when I search the inmates, When I sat there and hug them, when they get sentenced and they go to court and the DA tell them they're not ready, and in the 3-year process, oh, next time you come to court, you know what's going to happen? We're going to release you. And then he comes back 3 months later. I go, what happened? Oh, well, they said next time. Then the next time, they do it again and again and again. You said you walk through the jails. You said you do. You said you go to the clinic and you see them not providing service. Are you aware that officers are doing triples? Are you aware that we don't have staff? The commissioner, I never thought I'd be defending him, but he's tried to work with you over and over again. So he comes here and asks for these variances, and you sit there and you question and grill him. And I'm saying, we don't love what he's doing, but we understand what he's doing. The goal is to make a safer place. And young lady, we need you, but we need you to understand something. Well, we need you to understand all of these programs that we institute cannot happen unless they're safe. And maybe you don't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter to you, but the next time you're in one of these fancy coffee shops, look outside that window and you're going to see a black kid, a Hispanic kid outside who can't afford a $7 cup of coffee, and he's going to be the one that's on the visit floor. So get it together. Let's stop this politicizing our young people and do something for them. But first, let's keep them safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale Wilker.
Chairman Brezhnev, members of the board, my name is Dale Wilker. I am from the Legal Aid Society. Let me just comment a bit on the last speaker. We, too, believe the jails must be safe. There are a lot of issues he brought up, but strip searches is one thing that is permitted. It's been permitted under the law for some time now, after the Supreme Court's decision in Board of County Freeholders versus Florence. We agree that security measures must be in place. That's why, obviously, there are so many guards in the jails. There probably need to be more guards. The issues of escorted housing or lockdown of the jails sometimes stem from the lack of sufficient guards to allow free movement or to allow housing areas to be open when one incident occurs in one part of the jail, because as we understand, there aren't sufficient number of guards to have more than one response unit in a jail, so everybody gets locked down. Security is incredibly important, and it is the basis for having any sort of ability to operate a jail and provide the type of services that the board mandates. But we shouldn't forget that security can go too far. That, as the Supreme Court has stated, there can be an exaggerated security response to legitimate peniological needs. And when that happens, the law steps in and says you can't do too much. You can't isolate a person forever. You can't torture a person. You can't put somebody in such a confinement that their mental health is lost. With that in mind, we'd like to express, first of all, that we concur in many respects with the position of the Brooklyn Defenders Service. We won't repeat everything that was said in their statement, but we do want to highlight a number of issues that are the basis for our opposition for the request of the department for a 6-month limited variance to section 1.16C2, which would permit the department to place young adults aged 18 to 21 into the enhanced supervision housing area. Section 1-16C excludes the same categories of individuals from enhanced security housing as are excluded from punitive segregation. Those exclusions include, as you know, inmates under the age of 18, inmates with serious mental or serious physical disabilities or conditions, and the subject of this variance, inmates aged 18 through 21. As a matter of background, the department previously received a 3-month variance to this particular requirement. The 3-month variance was granted with specific conditions that should continue if the variance is granted a second time. But in their first request for this variance, the department made clear that they also intend to pursue rulemaking if they decided that enhanced security housing was a good idea for the young adult population. At this point, having requested yet another variance, and we doubt that the department really does have any intention of coming into compliance with this particular standard, ever. In fact, we believe that they intend to continue to commingle young adults with adults in enhanced security housing, and they intend to develop a full-fledged young adult enhanced security housing area. So this limited variance, and I emphasize limited, is not really a limited variance. It is a foreshadowing of the department's intent to make this permanent and to expand its use. The department is claiming that they will end the practice of punitive segregation for young adults aged 19 to 21. They've already ended it for the 18-year-olds. However, they are doing so at the same time that the board is reporting violations of the standards at the West facility. And they are backing away from many of the elements in the young adult plan, and they want to use the enhanced security housing for the young adult population. That makes it extremely hard for us to support a limited variance if that is the trajectory of the department's intentions. So we oppose the grant of this variance. There are many housing units that are available now for the young adult population, and there is no continuing basis for the failure to comply with the standards. In fact, the department is not even suggesting that they are going to come into compliance at any specific date. If the variance is granted, however, it should include all of the conditions that were implemented at its grant at the July 12th board meeting. It is our understanding that the young adults in enhanced security housing are attending school, and that the hours in school are counted as part of their 7-hour out-of-cell lockout time. The school hours should be in addition to the 7 hours, not deducted from the 7 hours. In addition, it is our understanding that the denial of contact visits for young adults and possibly others in the enhanced security housing area has become routine, and rather than based on individualized need, such as misbehavior during the visit process, violent misbehavior. The denial of contact visits for these young adults and others must not be based on rote, following of a procedure that has no substantive basis for the denial of this protected right. We also ask that the board ensure that the young adults and everyone else in enhanced security housing receive the 7 hours of lockout time each day in a manner that does not cause them to be locked up for periods that exceed 24 hours. The enhanced security housing schedule continues to be implemented in a manner that results in extended periods of lock-in during some of these days. As the Bronx defenders pointed out, it can extend into 24 hours. We ask that the board report on the compliance with the visit standard, the lockout standard, and other board standards in the enhanced security housing area for the young adult population. Such report should be made public before the end date of the variance, if it is granted, and periodic reviews of the enhanced security housing area should be required, and the grant of this variance and the stated intent to pursue rule changes on the exclusion of young adults requires that the public be informed of the factual basis. So therefore, Any reviews, any information the department gathers during the variance period should be made public well in advance of any other continuation of the variance. Thank you for your attention, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we do have variances to consider. They are all in the context of pretty much in the young adult plan and programs and housing for young adults. So Judge Hamel, do you want to begin with a committee update and then move to the EOC presentation of variance?
Good morning, everyone. I had a session meeting with Commissioner Conkling's team on Monday about an update on the young adult strategy. So I think it's actually important for you all to hear that information before I give my update and the team of the variance. So, Commissioner Conklin, with respect to there has been some substantial changes in the strategy that we should all do.
So thank you. As you know, we've been working now probably for about 2 years, both on our adolescent strategy and our young adult strategy, where Mark Cranston talks about the adult systems and their move to eliminate or reduce punitive seg, something juvenile systems across the country have done probably 10, 15 years ago. So using models both from this country and from other countries in the world where punitive segregation or long-term isolation has pretty much eliminated or in some cases never been used. This is one model as we look at the young adult strategy here in New York. It's really built on evidence and not on someone's opinion. I don't think we strive to be first, but we do strive to be the best. And I think this jail system in the city of New York deserves a lot of credit and for all the hard work that our staff have done to build the strategy and build the model. So as we know, we initially were going to put all of our young adults in one facility. That proved to be overwhelming for our staff, overwhelming for the physical plant. And so we moved away from that strategy. And as you'll see from Wynette's presentation, you know, we've offered a couple of alternatives. We had one planned mixing strategy, mixing young adults and adults in AMKC, which has been in effect for the past 2.5 weeks to manage the incidents, to make sure the violence was under control. That has been very successful. Using enhanced supervision is another piece. Secure unit. Secure unit, while we've had issues from time to time, we did process a couple of young people from that unit, put them in an adult setting in GRVC, and it's been very successful. So overall, I think the strategy is working. We've had great results, and we'll move forward with that. I'll have Wynette talk a little bit of the details. Wynette?
So good morning, everyone. As Commissioner Ponch mentioned, over the last 6 months, we have really reassessed our young adult plan and took some of the lessons learned and utilized that to create some modifications to the original plan. One of the things, I'll briefly go over some of the steps that we took. So one of the things our Chief of Staff mentioned earlier was that we went through a process of restarts. We paid close attention to our high classification young adults and a lot of attention to our young people currently in GMDC, and really revamped our housing strategy that included many of the restart activities that our Chief of Staff mentioned, which is staff orientation, the young adult orientation, as well as staff development, and just a look at programming and really figuring out what are the best ways to effectively manage this population. It's a really unique population as we discussed the last time. In addition to that, we looked very closely at our special management units, which we refer to as Second Chance and the Transitional Restorative Unit, as well as Secure, which manage some of our young people who are committing some egregious acts while in custody. And we really did a restart in some of those areas as well to really make sure all staff and the population were on the same page as it relates to expectations for this group. In addition to that, we looked at the different housing options that we had for young people. And as mentioned the last time, we recognized there is no cookie cutter approach. So we're utilizing a number of different options. One is what the commissioner spoke about, which currently exists in AMKC, which is a young adult population that is mixed with an adult population. And as the commissioner mentioned, no issues at all in that unit at this time. And as a matter of fact, the staff and the population, both the young people and the older adults, are very happy and seem to be enjoying the programming that's being offered in that unit. Right now, we have one house that has a 16 adults. It has up to 16 adults and 8 young people. So it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. In addition to that, we looked at, as Judge Hamill mentioned the last time, we looked at the ESH model and tried to figure out if some of our young people are committing egregious acts, if that is an opportunity to manage this population safely and effectively in that unit. And today we have 4 young people in that unit and minimal issues there. In addition to that, as you all know, yeah, now, exactly. So in general, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, but Secure and even the young adult model that we're talking about that we want to really employ for young people that will be in this young adult ESH, we're really talking about utilizing the vehicle of a 7-hour lockout, because we want to find ways in which we can have people come out safely, participate in programming, but also minimize the damage that takes place when you lock someone in a 23-hour setting, 22 to 23-hour setting. Let me just finish. So in addition to that, what we want to do is utilize that time to really create options for obtaining and creating a comprehensive profile. So we want to utilize this time to have people participate 7 hours out, 4 hours programming, recreation, and different things of that nature, but also make sure that we do an appropriate assessment to figure out what is the most suitable housing for this person. In addition to that, one of the other things that we're working on very closely with H&H is the development of a PACE unit for young people. As you know, it's been really effective across Island, and we want to make sure that young people who are exhibiting mental health needs that can benefit from a PACE unit also have the opportunity to participate in such. Sure.
What you're saying about the enhanced supervision,
Yes.
if I recall, the commissioner had agreed that we would eliminate punitive seg and enhanced supervision for young adults. Now, I understand you're asking to use that again. And when we did do the rulemaking, I think it's extremely important for everyone to be aware of this, because the commissioner had agreed that we would not include them. When we did the rulemaking, it was looking at criteria with respect to adults and not necessarily young adults. Also, the reason, my understanding to a great extent, that the board agreed ultimately with the 7-hour lockout is because based on the numbers you anticipated would need to be placed in enhanced supervision, that you would not be able to safely lock 50 out for 14 hours. And that's how we came up with the 7 hours. That's the basis. That's highly restrictive. So there has to be due process and really very, very good reasons for why a young person would need to be locked in. Because
I agree with you, Judge.
It looks like punitive seg light, right?
I agree with you,
Punitive seg light
Judge,
is
in
7
terms of eligibility criteria. So the eligibility criteria for this unit would be stabbing, slashing, and committing serious injury to staff or their peer. So it's very egregious crimes. This is not a net widening process. This is really taking a look at the kids that are not doing well in public setting and really a risk to their peers as well as staff.
Okay, you may continue.
Any other questions, Dr. Gowen?
Yes, if you could explain why locking them up for an additional 7 hours would decrease the risk.
So what I can say, Dr. Coleman, is that across the country, it's 22 to 23 hours. We're starting somewhere and we're utilizing 7 hours. 7 hours is something that we can do effectively, and we've learned from ESH that it's working well. So we want to utilize this as an opportunity to pilot for young people as well.
I have some questions about
Sure.
the young adult strategy in general. And I know when I worked with Commissioner Pont and your team, the whole idea was that these young people have unique needs.
Absolutely.
And the city of New York has made a commitment, and the commissioner and your team has made a commitment to try to reduce recidivism, improve their outcomes, and try to tailor the housing conditions such to try to give them that better chance.
Absolutely.
So what you've discussed is it is actually a pretty dramatic shift from what we can see on the Board of Correction. At some point, you had close to 800 young adults in GMDC in June, and then you started sending not out just the high classification young adults, but also lower class and medium class, and doing blended these blended houses. I believe you didn't state it today, but I believe that you had stated at your board meeting earlier this week or last week that the idea would be just to use GMDC for those who wanted education.
No.
So,
So let me clarify. We're going to look at GMDC as the primary programming hub. So what we really want to do there is make sure if you want to go to school, there is a school there for you to go to. We don't want to utilize those slots for someone who says, I don't want to go to school and I'd rather do some other types of programming, which is available in a place like AMKC. So there are some changes based on need and the space that's available for young people who are interested in the offerings that are being provided over in GMDC.
Okay, so let me just flesh that out a little
Sure.
bit, because I think it really relates to the restrictive housing as well. I am aware that you all have always taken the position that you might need to move out the most dangerous, the most violent out of GMDC so that you can manage generally the young adult population better and give them education as well as all of this additional programming. Now, part of the regs require age-appropriate programming for this age cohort. And I understand you're setting up one and plan on setting up a couple of other units. But my question is this: we've got 2 school areas. I know one's starting renovation. We have this big peace center that's been created for all this program. We have $21 million that have been given us from City Council to do all this programming. I still don't understand why you can't use GMDC, that certainly has the bed space, to be able to house most of the young people, the low and medium classification, so that they are directly supervised by officers who are really, truly dedicated and committed to this age cohort. They'll have access to all of the programming. If you need blended housing units, you've got more than 100 adults in GMDC. You could blend them there, and then they would get all the benefits.
So I'm glad you said that, Judge. I'm glad you said that. So there are a couple of things. Along with placing blended units in different facilities, that staff is also subject to be trained and selected for the work that they do. So what we don't want to do is not look at the lessons learned. In June, we saw that filling that facility with more than 700 young people did not work for the department. So learning from those lessons, we don't want to continue doing something that does not work. So we have to learn from the lessons. In addition to that,
May I
sure.
just ask a question about that? Because we were very well aware in June that there was a crisis at GMDC. And I
Yes.
believe there's been some candid conversations, which is important to flesh out a little bit here too, that in an effort to comply with the board's regs, you did move in a lot, and I understand why, the high classification. I understand a big group of officers came who didn't have an opportunity to be fully trained and well-versed in how to manage the young people. We didn't have a secure unit set up, so there wasn't a place to divert those that were more dangerous and violent. And certainly I see a big shift in, to the extent that you now have a very committed warden and leadership team to these young adults. The reason I raise this is I toured GMDC last Monday, and I never in a million years would have thought that the city and the commission and the department were capable of being able to create such a youth-friendly jail that was really going to improve our outcomes. So my interest is to see that as available to as many of our young people as we safely can do so.
And I would like to say, Judge, that's why you have to trust us. It's working because we are employing what we have learned. You have to trust us. You have to look at what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's intentional. The other thing I wanted to tell you is that the other thing I don't want anybody to walk away from this conversation not recognizing that we do have challenging young people in GMDC as well. We have all of the transitional restorative unit youth, and we have all of the second chance youth. So these are kids that are quite challenging as well. But the reason why it's working, Judge, is because we're looking at the lessons we're learning and we're changing and tweaking as needed. So I just ask you to trust what we're doing.
What percentage do you think will end up being in GMDC, whether it's about education or programming versus being in these other housing units?
Right now, we're looking.
Yeah, sure. Just to give you a sense, because I think, Judge, you're right. A majority of the young adults are still in GMDC, and the focus has always been that. On rough numbers, I don't have the exacts. Basically around
Down
600.
in the 50, a little bit in the 50%. We're below
No, it's actually
600 now, unless you went back up.
It's over 50%. It's around the 60% because the total population of young adults is also down. Remember, we had talked about a year ago coming in with around 1,200. It's fluctuating a little bit around 1,000 or a little under 1,000. So just wanted to make sure that there still is a majority in GMDC, and that has always been kind of the plan and the effort. Particularly as Winnett's put more programming and more training into GMDC, the focus on GMDC has been those who are most receptive to that programming, and either people moving out because of security concerns or because they have opted not to kind of participate in those programming. And we're trying to expand, as you know, one of our greatest efforts right now is trying to push and expand programming everywhere. And as we develop these commingled program where we can give targeted programming to these populations, we'll get into those facilities as well.
And with the commingle, is there a criteria that you're using to determine who would be in GMDC versus who would be in AMKC and the commingle program?
So oftentimes it has been, there's no magical, I would say, recipe for it, but it has been high classification and youth who do not want to participate in school. Any other questions, Judge?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. I just have a couple of comments at this point in terms of giving my update. You know, I was appointed 3 years ago by Mayor Bloomberg, and we had, the board was commencing the elimination or the rulemaking regarding punitive segregation and how it could be safely reduced. And I was asked to chair the Adolescent and Young Adult Committee, and shortly thereafter, Commissioner Pont was appointed, and we have worked very well together with Commissioner Pont and his team to reach what I think is a very historic day and a huge accomplishment for Commissioner Pont and his team in the city of New York, and that's the elimination of reliance upon the imposition of solitary confinement for young people. I've seen over this 2.5 years, the commissioner build a foundation upon which to safely do so. Part of the process to end punitive segregation was to create the young adult plan that would meet the unique needs of the young adults while improving the outcomes and reducing recidivism for the youth of the city of New York, and working together with the commissioner and his team and the agency and many, many advocates around the city of New York, a comprehensive young adult strategy with the housing plan was designed, where essentially GMDC, it was going to be originally GRVC and GMDC, but it was reduced to GMDC, would be the young adult jail that would have a lot of age-appropriate programming, educational services, officers who were directly supervising the young people, and leadership committed to the future of these young people. I truly do commend Commissioner Pont and his entire team for having created a young adult jail at GMDC where there is good morale, there is hope, there is respect, there is productive programming. I speak to the young people. I see the difference. I speak to the officers. The officers, many of them are the same officers that had to maintain safety and security in the solitary confinement units. They are much more pleased working with the young people and helping their future than just keeping them locked in. To end punitive segregation, Pont has requested many of these restricted housing units. True and Shoe were created in RNDC and then they were piloted in GMDC. Then knowing one more unit was going to be necessary with further restrictions to be able to manage the persistently violent and extremely dangerous young adults, this Board of Correction granted variances to its minimum standards to allow for the creation of the secure unit. Now, it's my understanding that there's no metrics yet designed, nor evaluations presented to the Board of Correction, and that DOC now will be seeking to extend enhanced supervision for young adults and create a new enhanced supervision. I think it's important to say, because I do think we need to go into rulemaking and we need to go into it as quickly as we can. When Commissioner Pond has met with the board and discussed the restrictive housing and the elimination of solitary, he said from the very beginning he did not want to use enhanced supervision as a tool. I take him at his word that now that he's come to the board, he feels that there is some enhanced supervision that he will need as a tool to be able to safely manage this population without the imposition of solitary confinement. However, we don't have the evaluations of True Shoe Secure. We don't even have the evaluation of enhanced supervision for adults. And what was created was not for young adults in particular. We're also awaiting Vera's segregation reduction analysis, as well as an evaluation by Vera on the young adult plan. So at this time, I believe we've accomplished a great deal to meet the needs of young people here. I think we should better evaluate the causes of violence, including management failures and any failure to comply with key Board of Correction standards like recreation. Young people get very upset when they don't get their minimum standards. Much of this has been remedied now. So my hope is that before shifting gears too dramatically to start sending too many young people out of GMDC and into blended units where they'll be mixed with adults, and ultimately much of this could fall apart, I hope that we can try to balance the tension between reducing violence with the goal of improving outcomes and reducing recidivism, because I believe we're very well on the way, and with some more tweaking of the young adult plan, we'll be able to succeed. Thank you. I believe the commissioner is going to present his
the commissioner is
variances.
going to present two variance requests at this time. Please.
Thank you, Board. So, in order to officially end the use of punitive seg for the 19 or 21-year-old, we're asking for a variance to continue to commingle 19, 21-year-olds in ESH, as well as a variance to allow us to also place 18-year-olds in ESH as well. Again, for each of these, there will be for those who are persistent in violence and who show the criteria. We'll follow the same protocols as ESH in terms of due process. And we also, as Wynette has described, specifically for the young adult in ESH, we have developed a programming and assessment process for each of those who would be subject to this. Again, the numbers based on our record so far have been relatively low, but we would request this variance to deal with those persistently violent young adults.
All right, so I have a couple of questions. You had submitted originally one variance request on enhanced supervision with two parts. One was to continue to commingle 19 to 21 with the adults, and the other was to create a brand new enhanced supervision unit for 18 to 21s. As I've said before the meeting, and we can discuss here, my recommendation would be that the board not authorize a brand new unit, enhanced supervision, for 18 to 21s, because we really haven't looked at the criteria regarding the young adults since it was created originally for adults. When you just mentioned the 18 with the 19 to 21-year-olds, is that request with respect to commingling with the adults in enhanced supervision, pending further rulemaking and pending evaluations?
The 18-year-olds would not be commingled with the 22 and over.
Okay, let me just ask, because you're asking for two separate variances. One includes the 18s and the other does not. The Board of Correction changed its regulations and now sees 18s, they used to be part of adolescent, pursuant to the change in state law and our regulations, 18s are young adults. There's nothing in the Board of Correction standards that precludes them right now with the variance to being commingled with adults. And my understanding, there's nothing in Nunez specifically that precludes them from being commingled with adults.
I don't believe that's true. I think in Nunez, we are not permitted to commingle the 18-year-olds with the 22 and over. And that is one of the reasons why we're not planning on commingling them in the ESH.
And I know that's been your position, not to do that, and I understand it's much easier to collect the data to report on compliance with Nunez, but you're saying there's a provision in Nunez that precludes 18-year-olds from being mixed with the adults?
Yes, the Nunez consent judgment has provisions that require that the 18-year-olds not become, that 18-year-olds have their housing areas that are where they're not permitted to be with the 22 and over.
I don't have the Nunez with me, but that wasn't my understanding. Okay. With respect to, so you're requesting both, if you'll be clear on your variance request.
Yes. Sorry.
And distinguish them because
one
they're
is
different.
a variance to commingle 19 to 21-year-olds in ESH. Separately, we have a variance to utilize ESH with the 18-year-olds and to be able to kind of essentially create a young adult enhanced supervision housing because of the need to separate 18 from the 22 and above.
And with respect to the enhanced supervision for, let's say, the commingling with the adults, I spoke with the young people when I toured last Monday, and they were upset that their school time was being used against their lockout time. They want to be able to exercise their educational rights to go to school, because they do have those rights to the age of 21, but they also don't want to have to take away from their lockout. Would you agree that it would be important for them to have the 3 hours in addition to the lockout and agree to do so?
So I know that you raised this before, and one of the things that we have learned is that in order to do a clean separation, the 7 and 7 would make the best sense because it's a 14-hour lockout. We don't want kids in enhanced restraints while there are others who are watching TV, because that presents an issue where you have people who have access to people who are restrained. And so this is something you just brought up, but in my opinion, I don't want to speak for the agency, it's not a safe way to separate individuals, some in restraints and some not.
Can I ask, What's prompting the request to add 18-year-olds to EHS? Is it because you can't safely manage them? Have there been some situations? Because my concern is that as we keep adding on these options, we'll keep figuring out ways to add young people to it. And I don't want to get to that particular
Yeah.
place. So if we're managing them pretty safely with Secure and True and Shoe, what necessitates this move?
So there's a couple of things. One, right now, the 18 to 21-year-old young adult ESH is a little bit of a different focus. It provides us with an opportunity to create a comprehensive profile. Right now, if something happens, people immediately get moved into a housing placement, and we don't know what will happen until something happens. So we don't have an opportunity to do a comprehensive assessment without moving into a housing area that we're saying is suitable right away. So this would give us the time to really identify the most appropriate and safe place to house someone. That's the difference.
Okay.
A number of months ago, the commissioner announced that 18-year-olds would not be in solitary confinement. That was an action that was taken. You set up Secure, you set up TRU, you set up Second Chance.
I know.
What is the mass of 18-year-olds that you need to establish a separate unit besides one where you already have substantial limitations in the amount of time that they're out of cell, and they have access to schools? Why set up another unit? How many people are you talking about that need to be?
Only the people that do stabbing, slashing, and it's not a lot of people, but it gives us an opportunity to really create a comprehensive assessment. Yeah, but as I mentioned,
You have this capacity for them in Secure.
so as I mentioned the last time, in Secure, there's a 10-hour lockout, and there is more free movement because these kids, we have gotten them to the point where they are participating in program. There are a few that are not, but in majority is participating in programming. And what we've noticed is that when you have someone that has committed a slashing today and I throw them in Secure, it throws off all the kids that are doing well. And so it's about really trying to make sure they're optimal conditions for that are conducive to programming.
And just to clarify for me, then you would have a situation where someone could be in Second Chance, someone could be in TRU, someone could be in Secure, they could do however many days in Secure, and then they could be placed in enhanced restraint, which would give them less hours than they would have in Secure indefinitely, because that's the at ESH, you don't have to get out of ESH.
No, enhanced restraints don't give you less hours.
Yes, 7 hours.
No, you said, no, enhanced supervision. Okay, because I was getting a little confused.
Just gives you 7 hours, so it's less than all of those other programs. It's a more punitive unit. I don't understand the need for it based upon what you already have with all the new units that we.
I know.
If I can interject,
Yeah, sure.
perhaps you can just walk us through.
Right.
What I'm appreciating here, based on what you've shared, is that you've determined that you need to treat the Secure and the transitional as a step down, just as you sometimes do for the adults, 22 and over. And so you need something. You're no longer going to move forward with punitive segregation, but you need something that provides another level of security and safety, because you cannot immediately place them in Secure and transition. And so I think what would be helpful here is to help us all understand what is it that you're going to achieve with an enhanced unit for 18-year-olds, and how does that help you, and how do you ultimately move them to step down?
Sure. So what happens is, let's just say somebody commits a stabbing today in our custody. If we had a young adult ESH, this individual will go into this housing area, and immediately different types of assessments, which are not currently being done, are done here, so that a more comprehensive profile of this individual can be created, so we could determine, do they go to Secure or do they go to a blended ESH? Because remember, Secure and ESH are programming models where people are doing congregate programming, and people have free movement. It's very different from for someone who just committed a slashing, and that person may not be in the right state of mind to be around others, and it also put the others on edge when other people come in. I mean, we've heard that from the young people. So what we're trying to do really is to provide the opportunity for the department to create a safe environment for young people who commit egregious crimes immediately versus doing this trial and error thing. Because if you immediately have to pop someone in, you don't know what will happen. So this will give us time to really assess, talk to the person, and really get them in the rhythm of programming versus dropping them into a unit where everybody else might be doing well.
Does that mean this might be a temporary placement then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it might be a temporary placement if we find that this person can move to another placement.
But not necessarily a temporary.
Not necessarily. So I don't know. I'm sorry for the examples, but remember I mentioned the last time that we've had situations where we find out we have a lot of information, and then we find out at the moment of placement insecure through our orientation process that there is some prevailing intel that we didn't know otherwise from finding out from this young adult that was about to be placed that might cause some serious issues once placed in secure. Like I mentioned, the placement of a young man who had killed another young man's brother. But there was nothing in our records, no court order separation, nothing that we could point to that would have told us that outside of our own 1 hour orientation. If that young person hadn't told us during that orientation, we could have been in a really serious issue. So this gives us time to really create a comprehensive profile and assessment of who we're working with and how can we safely house this person.
I guess the question, and it goes back to Jennifer's question. Jennifer's question is like, what is the vision, right? How long will someone stay in this unit? What is the criteria for determining whether or not this person is ready and acceptable and eligible for secure? Like, what are those elements of your vision for this housing with respect to how long? And
So, if we remembered, we talked about looking at behavior and how long do we need to look at somebody? How long do we need to see evidence of someone showing that they're interested in program or showing that they're interested in being involved in something that could potentially be life-changing for them? And so because ESH already has the vehicle of 45 days, we want to use it so that there are two tiers. The first tier is a 28 days, so potentially somebody could leave within 28 days if they're suitable. If not, somebody can go to the 45th day and leave after that. But if somebody tells us, like many young people do, if I get housed with so-and-so, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, we have to listen. So it's really based on the individualized needs of individuals who get placed in this unit. And we've been doing a lot of individualized work. I mean, if you think about it, today we only have 4 people there. So it's not a large number that we're really talking about. The only thing I'm concerned about is that if we don't message this properly through the public and the media, that young people will think this is a time I can do things to hurt people and there aren't the same consequences. So we have to make sure we message this responsibly as the public.
And I think as Lynette said, I just wanted to clarify, once again, this is a small population. In terms of the people that have been put in, as we talk about where we need these options, one, it's the first time in the nation that we're addressing this population and dealing with the violence in this population. We've set up Second Chance and True. Right now, we have roughly 50 people total in the entirety of those different programs. So right now around True, we have around 20 people who are participating in True right now. A little over 16 or 17, I forget, in Second Chance. There are just 4 in the current setting that we would put in ESH. And then there's, sorry, just trying to make sure I have all the numbers right, 10 in Secure right now. So these are small numbers relative to the larger 1,000 people who are young adults for which we are trying to develop other programming and approaches.
Jeff, could you say where the 4 people are right now?
They're
Those are 4 18-year-olds.
No, they're not. They're for 19 to 21-year-olds who are in OVCC 3 South, for which we would make ESH given this variance.
Are there any 18-year-olds right now?
No.
Okay.
And are there any 18-year-olds on the horizon, as it were? You have 18-year-olds who are.
Could be
I
an
don't know
hour.
if we can say.
It could be the next hour. What does a typical day look like for these individuals in ESH?
Sure. So it'll be 4 hours of programming,
Okay.
1 hour of rec, 2 hours of day room, and included in that, they can have 3 hours of schooling.
Okay.
I have some additional questions. So if I understand it, at this point, the young adult strategy is changing where you're going to start having blended units and putting young adults in with adults in other jails like AMKC. And we have young adults mixed with adults in the enhanced supervision. It sounds to me like you're asking for a separate new enhanced supervision for young adults because you can't put the 8, or you believe you can, and I think we really have to check in because that was not my understanding. But because you believe you couldn't put 18-year-olds in with the adults, is that correct?
Well,
is that the only reason?
No, let me just say, Judge, the current the current ESH is a programming model. It's very different. It's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. This is very different. So this serves as an assessment, but it's still the 7-hour window.
Okay, so
It's
now
very
I understand. Now what we're really talking about then is a different kind of unit that's at least, you're using the name enhanced supervision, but it's really an assessment unit that also has enhanced supervision approach. Is that correct?
Your Judge Hamill, let me, in terms of Nunez, effectively, the way Nunez reads right now, with the supervision ratios that are required, 15 to 1 and 25 to 2, and the way we have to separate high classification and low classification inmates, and the programming requirements, effectively, we need to separate the 18-year-olds from the 22 and over. Because if we placed 18-year-olds with anyone 22 and over, we would have to provide the same kind of programming for the commingled housing unit for all the other inmates. And I don't know that we have those resources. So
What would that be?
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm just saying in terms of what the terms are of Nunez and what this means, the impact placing 18-year-olds with 22 and over, that's something we'd have to definitely look at in terms of the ratio. But effectively right now, the way the department has been handling the 18-year-olds is the way that we have been separating them from the 22 and over, so that, and commingling them with the 18 to 21-year-olds so that we can provide all the requirements in Nunez. So there may be, if we also spoke with the monitor, there may be some way to try to work something out where we place 18-year-olds with the 22 and over. But given what our burdens are and our obligations are with all the programming and the requirements, that has not been something we can do right now. So it's something we can look at, but I'm not sure that that is something that
right.
makes
So,
sense.
but it's not part of the consent judgment that they cannot be mixed. It's just in terms of operational, it's much easier for you all to comply. And I understand that's a significant factor to comply if they are not mixed in. But let me just go back and ask a couple further questions. The way you're describing this new unit, you would be asking us to authorize, which doesn't sound strictly like enhanced supervision. There's been no rulemaking for that kind of unit. Am I correct?
So I just want to say one thing, and I just wanted to look back in retrospect and look at the fact that when we first started these conversations, we had over 200 people in PSEG, 23 hours lockdown. Today we have over 50 people in therapeutic units. We have 4 people that would have been in PSEG, which shows the dramatic reduction of individuals that are even being subjected to 6.5 hours out. We're talking about something that we need to manage this population effectively and safely. You mentioned that you see a difference. Give us a chance to show you that there'll be more differences that you can see.
Okay, so with all due respect, I think I can see where the tension is now. We're public officers, we're an independent regulatory board. We're bound by CAPA in rulemaking. We are not to be essentially conducting rulemaking based on presentations and some written information. And this new unit sounds, I'd never heard of it until very recently, and it sounds like a change on enhanced supervision. Also, the enhanced supervision rulemaking we did do was for adults. It wasn't for young adults. So I don't have any trouble allowing you to commingle. I would even include 18-year-olds in there, and then you could try to work it out with the monitor, because part of what you could do, we built enhanced supervision for 250 adults. We don't have 250 adults there. You could move out the adults and use the unit you have for just young adults, and therefore put 18 to 21 in there without the board granting a variance to authorize a new unit that's like enhanced supervision and assessment. Let me just say one further thing. This sounds very much to me, not the assessment piece, but the criteria piece sounds very much to me like what you said when you asked for secure. And when you asked for secure, you said these are the type of inmates it would be for. And so we authorized secure, and it was my understanding there were going to be 2 secures, there were going to be 8 different units, so that there would be able to be the separation. Plus, the board has authorized de-escalation. So in that case where you have an inmate that's completely out of control, you can use the de-escalation model that the board and I know the monitor has approved.
So may I just,
Yes.
I need clarity.
Yes, please.
And I believe that Judge Hamill has done an excellent job of providing, for several of us on the board, I know myself, a better appreciation of the rulemaking and the CAPA process. But I just think we need to pause here for a second. Are we having a discussion or debate about whether or not we should have ESH to begin with for 18-year-olds, or are we just simply talking? I understand we've got 2 variances out here, but I feel like we need to first deal with one issue. Do we have an issue with ESH for 18-year-olds? You're saying that you need this as as an alternative to punitive segregation. It does not work to put 18-year-olds immediately into secure or into transitional restorative when they've committed a violent infraction of a certain level, and you need something where you're moving away from PUNSEG, but you want to continue to ensure the safety of both inmates and of officers, and so you need something that is a step up from TRU and from secure, and that is not punitive segregation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And presently, we do not have a rule that allows us, and there's a difference of opinion as to whether or not we can put 18-year-olds with 19 to 21-year-olds and others in the ESH. So you need something. Is that correct? That's your understanding?
We need the variance. That's
Okay.
correct.
So I guess I'm going to turn to you, Chair, and ask, can we just separate these issues for a minute? There are 2 variances, and deal with one first and then move to the other, because we're getting this all mixed up and we're not really getting
So
anywhere.
we do need to separate them. The first being the extension of the existing authority for 19 and 21. The second variance incorporates 18-year-olds into the ESH rubric, though several things were not clear in the transmission, and I think they have become clearer during the discussion as to what the nature of the proposal is, what it's trying to achieve relative to the 18-year-olds, the relatively small size of the population in question. I think there are still a couple of questions to be dealt with in regard to the 18-year-olds, but we could act on the first variance right at this moment. And if someone would move that, we could have the formal discussion around that specific variance.
Before you move it, can you state specifically what it is?
Well, I actually would be making a motion to amend it. As I understand it, the commissioner is
Well,
asking-
first we need to move it, then we can amend it. So
Okay.
let's move it. Will someone just put forth the proposed variance, which is a continuation of the variance that was granted, and it includes conditions.
Well,
That's been raised, but the conditions were a part of the variance.
so Stan, just in terms of procedure, I'm happy to state the variance, but do we need to go through the conditions as part of the variance, or do you want?
No, I think
Why
we
don't
could
you
just,
state the
as
variance
part of the
first?
record.
I'm prepared to move the variance in which the commissioner seeks to extend the current variance for 19 to 21-year-olds to be commingled and enhanced supervision. I do have a number of conditions that I would like to add to that for discussion, but I move that.
Okay, and if I can get a second. So that's now on the table, and it is open. The discussion is now open on that variance and for amendments.
And that's for
which
6
are
months.
conditions.
Is that correct?
No, I'm only moving it for 3 months. That's why I didn't know whether we need to put the conditions in now. I would only be moving it for a 3-month period so that we can have an assessment of true, secure, enhanced supervision all together at the same time as we get ready to move in to restricted housing, as it essentially is authorizing another form of restricted housing. But I do have an amendment to that, and I know it sounds like Deputy Commissioner Grossman has confirmed that it's not legally a restriction to mix 18 with adults, but that in terms of operations, it's an impediment for them. I would move to amend their variance to include the 18-year-olds, 18 to 21, so that they have a tool, they could commingle them with adults in this first variance.
Before we move forward, Judge Hamill, I guess one question I have is I'm not quite understanding what the impediment is to having an 18-year-old in enhanced supervision with 19 and 21-year-olds, if that's what the makeup of that area is. Or if we place 18-year-olds with 22 and over, that's something that we can work out with the monitor. But I'm not understanding what the problem is.
Okay, so let me explain. It sounds like some of the board is confused too, and I think part of it was the way you originally drafted your variances. You have 2 variances for young adults before the board. One is the 19 to 21-year-olds to continue to allow the commingling and enhanced supervision while you finalize your strategy, while we go into rulemaking on restrictive housing. That's one. The second one is to create a new enhanced supervision unit, a brand new unit.
No, that is not. The first one is to renew the use of enhanced supervision housing for 19 and 21-year-olds. We received that variance back in the summer, and we're asking to renew that. The second one, because we did not ask originally for a variance for the 18-year-olds back in the summer, we recognize that to move forward with including the 18-year-olds, we have to make a new variance. And that new variance is to allow us to place 18-year-olds in enhanced supervision housing. Now, how it is that we place the 18-year-olds in the enhanced supervision housing with our obligations under Nunez is something that we have to consider. But they're 2 variances that we're asking.
But commingling with adults is not a part of the original request?
Well, we
Because
already
that's
received,
certainly
right.
been the
We
discussion
already
up there.
have the commingling variance. We also sought a variance last June for commingling the 18 to 21-year-old cohorts with 22 and over. I'm sorry, the 19 to 21-year-olds with 22 and over. And that doesn't expire until several months ahead. So we're not seeking the...
So just to pursue that, if the 18-year-olds were incorporated into your ability to use ESH, the
Right.
second variance, would they also be commingled with 22 and over?
I'm not sure that they would be. But that's not something that we have been seeking right now.
Okay, so the 18-year-olds would not be in your current request. They would be included with 19 to 21-year-olds.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Not a separate.
Correct.
So that really simplifies,
Yes.
clarifies what it is, and they are related. So,
But can we just be clear on this? This new unit
trying.
you're talking about, Lynette Saunders has said would be somewhat different. It would have an assessment component. It wouldn't be exactly like enhanced supervision. Is that not what we were just told?
Sorry, Brent. Sorry, Judge. So, to be clear in here, so there are two variances. The first one is to extend a variance to make sure there's 19 or 21 year old. Because of certain restrictions you have, we've asked for a second variance that is new because the 18s were never handled in the first variance. We wanted to use the ESH with the 18-year-olds because we were having an ESH that would be just focused on the 18 to 21-year-olds. We designed a different programmatic approach. There is nothing new about the ESH in terms of the lockout or other things. The same requirements of ESH would occur. The only difference here is that, and maybe we confused it, we wanted to approach the population in that ESH a little differently, and therefore what you hear as assessment is our attempt to put in some structure to the program that is specific to that age cohort, different from what we are doing now with ESH, which is proving successful with the adults, but we want to do a little something different, and that's why we called it something different.
So the 18-year-olds
ESH
would
is the
be
same.
would be physically located in the same unit as the 19 to 21, but they would be subjected to different programmatic considerations.
That
Is that what you're
group would
saying?
have it, yes.
yes, Bob.
And I might just add that as to Nunez, to the point of different program requirements and different ratios, staffing ratios, et cetera, this is an effort to make sure that we're also compliant with Nunez in terms of our obligations to provide programming.
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, we approved the ESH to help, for adolescents, young adults, to help you move towards limited and solitary confinement. We approved the secure second chance to give you other ways, and now it's basically just a unit which will replace your unit, as I see it, with only 7 hours a day of lockout without a procedure that gets you out of it. And expanding this without our understanding is not something the board should be doing today. As ESA currently exists, and as you're asking us to set up a new unit here, people will be placed under the same reason they're being placed in secure. They will not have a limit of the amount of time that they will spend there, because the ESH does not have a limit of time that people will spend there. And I don't think the board today has heard enough programmatically to justify creating this kind of unit. So I think we should just expand, we should just continue the transition, in the 3-month period, as Judge Hamilton said, with 3 hours additionally for education, which is not a problem physically, because they're all in the same place potentially anyway. But it doesn't matter. This is what you need to do, to give them their education program as well as their time in the service.
So I'm going to hold on to that because we'll come back to the second variance and have some discussion about the desirability of incorporating 18-year-olds into ESH. But let's do the first one, and just to organize this in some way, I think we have to deal with the amendment first. And it was, the amendment was to change the term in the variance request from 6 months to 3 months. Is that right? That's the amendment. So that's been moved and seconded, I believe. Any discussion on 6 months versus 3 months? Is there any discussion? I'll ask the department to if they wish to respond to the time frame.
I think that, as we've stated in our letter, we understand from the judge's point of view that many of the things, efforts to develop a young adult plan have been predicated on us asking for variances as we test things out and make sure we can report back on what we feel is a safe balance. Obviously, we know that at some point we're going to have to move towards rulemaking through several of these pieces. So I think we would request a 6-month variance so we can actually go forward and commit to some of these things and develop some long-term assessments of these. 3 months, as I think everyone understands, particularly with the holidays coming, is a short time period, and it's a small number. So we want to kind of test different people who are going through this in various times. It's not about the time right now, because the numbers of people who have been in our population for these egregious acts have been small. So we need more time, and it's not to assess that.
What you know, I think that if recent history is any guide, I think we all ought to just admit that none of these time frames are at all reliable. So, I mean, you know, we can talk about 6 months, 3 months, or whatever, but I just don't see any way we can place any reliance on any kind of projected time frames if you look back at what's gone on in the last 6, 9 months or year on these very issues. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I just don't see any way to rely on any of this myself.
Obviously, operationally, one can understand the desire on the part of the department to have a longer period of time. But one thing we do get out of a shorter time frame is the ability to hear from you and to discuss with you the progress that you've made in the intervening, in this case 3 months. I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Or how many do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed to the 3 months amendment? I don't see any. So I don't know what that means, but 5 were enough to carry. So the variance is carried for 3 months, and we will hear from the department that at that time what the developments have been, and together with the department evaluate where the program is and what makes sense for the next period. I want to return. Yes. All right. Are these additional conditions, or are they the conditions that were in? Okay. Do any of the additional conditions that are going to be put forward, do they contradict the conditions that existed with the original variance? So we can assume that those conditions, the original conditions, still prevail?
Yes.
All right, let's hear the additions.
The first condition that I would move be included with this variance is that 3 hours of educational programming be offered to the young people in addition, not in lieu of, the 7 hours of lockout. Do you wish to vote on each one?
Yes. No, the department should have an opportunity to respond.
I think as we work with these young adults, the issues that we find is having a very structured day, and I think the structure of education or any program needs to stay intact. And adding hours to the day for free time, I don't really see a therapeutic benefit to that, since it's really the structure of the programming that will get us where we want to be and where we'd like to see these young people.
My response is that the more we lock down people and the more we harm them, and this is a measure to mitigate the harm of the extensive lock-in that occurs in enhanced supervision.
Please, Commissioner.
Just to the talk on harm, I mean, so there's been some national, international talk about isolation and punitive segregation, always used in the context of 23-hour-a-day lock-ins. I've seen no studies and no interaction anywhere in the country or the world that says 7 hours of a day somehow creates some psychological harm.
Commissioner, just to separate out the two obvious issues, desirability, benefit, disadvantage, what about achievability? Could you comment on whether the department can do this?
I think the structure for us is having inmates in a particular area that are out more hours of a day than other inmates. So create, I think, some bad blood within the housing unit. Functionally, as the units separate half and half, 7 hours out for one half the unit and 7 out for the other, it would make it very difficult to offer additional programs in that setting. There just aren't enough hours in the day. So.
Thank you. I'm going to, as we always do, I'm going to treat
Chair, can I also add one thing? This is particularly for this condition. I just want to be clear. This variance is for the 19 to 21-year-olds to be commingled in with the existing ESH program that exists now. So from a feasibility standpoint, we would not want to change ESH as it works now. Commingling 19 to 21-year-olds into this we would rather have it work within the current ESH structure, which is programmed and structured as the commissioner said. As a secondary issue, once we talk about 18 to 21-year-olds, if you want to talk about kind of education within that, where there is more of an obligation with the 18-year-old, that's a separate conversation.
Well,
so I know, I'm just
maybe a conversation that we have to have.
I'm just raising feasibility right now makes it harder for this, particularly because what we're trying to achieve within this ESH program.
But as we consider the 18-year-olds, the question will be reasserted. As we always do, we treat the proposals for conditions as amendments. So I'll need someone to move that condition.
Move.
And seconded. All right, discussion.
I think that we need to pay attention to and consider the point that was just made about this being an existing ESH unit and the challenges that will be presented in trying to, with 19 to 21-year-olds, create a program within a program for this particular population. It's a different deal when we start talking about creating an 18 to 21-year-old unit where it would be easier to implement for everyone and manage. But if we're talking about for a 3-month period, now creating a program within a program for 19 to 21-year-olds, I think we're creating work that maybe isn't necessary. There's a difference between looking at 18 to 21-year-olds and a new program. But for a period of 3 months, now taking time and attention from establishing and enforcing and building the programs that we desire just to now carve out a special program, unless someone can help me to appreciate how that's really going to benefit these 19 to 21-year-olds for a 3-month period and is worth the time and resources put to creating 2 separate programs for a period of 3 months, then I can't vote in favor of that.
Well, Jennifer, maybe I could just add, when I went and spoke to the young people, that, the day room and enhanced supervision is really large, and they can mingle and they can talk and they can socialize and they can play games, and they've got program counselors there. But they said they were giving up their right to go to school because they didn't want to miss that social part. But they didn't want to also give up their education. I also just want to say, with all due respect to the Department of Correction, when we added conditions to punitive seg to help end it, we added 2.5 hours of programming and we added 4 hours out of cell. And at that time, the department said they really couldn't do it. It would be a great operational strain. And they did do it. And I go there and I see that they were able to accomplish.
But what will happen? I'm just wondering. But let me ask you, and I'm not, as was said so eloquently earlier, I'm not in the jails every day, putting these programs and policies into play. I do have a question, and maybe it's, a simple and naive one, but if you now create a program within a program for people based on age, so the 19 to 21-year-olds get 10 hours, while 22 and over get only 7. Does that help you with safety? I don't know. That would be a concern of mine. And so, help me. I don't know.
No, that,
Any
that
other,
is accurate.
any other comment? Or
No, I really
discussion
do.
on
I
the
want to
board?
know
No.
about safety.
Yeah.
I think it's a real question.
yeah.
Jennifer, I agree with you 100%.
I just
You
want
asked us before, do we trust you? I trust you. I think that the data that this is like a data subject. You know,
Can't hear you, Michael.
the data that you introduced from 1,000 and that we're talking about 4, and these are very good questions and important questions. I trust you.
Any other
I
comment?
just to add something. In someone who's worked in corrections for 22 years, who's administered programs in corrections for 22 years, it's very difficult to implement something in 3 months and just throw it in. I think that we came here to vote on a variance that just deal with 19 and 21-year-olds. That's what I like to just hear and not add conditions at this point. I think you got enough on your plates to deal with. Safety and security is paramount right now. I don't know where you get the staffing to even put those people in to do that education at this point. I think a longer discussion for us, a bigger discussion, is to look at that and look at programming and talk about those things. But as a correctional administrator who's been in your shoes, I find it very difficult to say we can implement and impose that on you at this point in time. That's just my 2 cents.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, it's clearly, I mean, 3 months is a very short period to implement a program, but this has actually been almost 2 years. So it's not really 3 months, it's 3 additional months. This has been going on for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, what the condition that we have before us is the additional time out, not the length of time. This is an additional 3 hours. Is that not correct? The condition that was put forth. So that's the proposal immediately before us. The additional hours out that have been proposed as a condition. I'm going to call the question on that. All those in favor of that condition signify by saying aye. All those opposed? It does not, that condition will not be a part of the variance. Any other conditions?
I have one other condition. I would like to think the commissioner and his team would agree with this one. Enhanced supervision was designed for adults, and we have a look-back provision of 5 years for adults. It would be terribly unfair to look back at 19, 20, and 21-year-olds for the 5 years of actions that they might have committed while previously incarcerated or out. So I would add a condition that under the current criteria for placement with respect to young adults, that the look back be no more than 1 year for acts committed in jail. And I will preface it with saying that I spoke with a young person who said that he was placed there, and the last time he claims, I didn't verify it, that he had done anything violent or dangerous was 13 months ago. So I think 1 year is very reasonable, so that we're really tending to restrict those youth who truly really need it based on current
Commissioner?
actions.
Stan,
Yeah, oh, Mike, go ahead.
I disagree with that. These are the 4 people who have created the most offensive, the wounds that correction officers and medical staff and other people in Rikers Island haven't healed in a year. I do not agree with that.
I will only add that we always look at the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Typically in corrections, we would look at everybody's record all the way back basically to the beginning of time. That doesn't get you into the unit, but it's taken into consideration. I think a 5-year look back is more restrictive than most agencies have. But it's also, the 5-year look back doesn't put you in the unit. You would have had committed an act to get into the unit. And we take your prior behavior into consideration at that time. Can't hear what you're saying.
Is it possible to characterize these 4 people? What's different about them than the people in secure right now?
I couldn't do that publicly without looking at the cases here in front of us.
Do you know, Commissioner Saunders?
4 individuals that were placed in who committed slashing.
Who are in ESH?
Yes.
And were there other people in secure with who committed slashings?
Currently now, yes.
Right. So if
So that's going to be separate. That's why we're asking for the 18 to 21-year-old ESH for those individuals that are currently secure that are committing those acts. But that's a separate conversation.
Right. Because in order to get into secure, you have to commit that act. So the look back is not an issue really, because their present behavior is at issue, right? So the look back is not an issue.
No. Can you just distinguish, let's just be
Right.
real clear here. Distinguish the difference in the criteria for admission to secure with admission to enhanced supervision. My review of it is it would be much easier to get into enhanced supervision than secure. So what are the differences between those?
I thought it was, yeah.
In ESH, there's a history. In secure, there's a history, but there is also an immediate action that brought that person to
Right.
secure.
So there's an immediate action to be placed in secure that is not necessary for enhanced supervision, correct?
The person-
That's one of the big distinctions.
So in most cases, okay.
So there is no, it's not the difference in the criteria to get in. What we're saying, and this is part of, I guess, really the second variance that we're asking, and I think there's a lot of confusion going on, is that we're asking for the second variance so we do not place 18 to 21-year-olds directly, or mainly 18-year-olds, directly into secure after they have committed a slashing. Because as Commissioner said earlier, once an 18-year-old that has committed a slashing goes into the secure unit, it disrupts the rest of the entire secure unit programming because the individuals that are there now that are programming are now fearful of that individual who had just committed a slashing. And we have seen that currently in our secure unit, where individuals who committed acts of violence, namely a slashing, at GMDC and were placed in secure, it disrupted the entire unit. We had a unit that was well functioning, put those individuals into secure because that's what the criteria we had, and it disrupted the entire unit. So part of the second variance that we're going to be seeking, right, is to put those 18-year-olds who commit those acts of violence not directly into secure. We place them into 18 to 21-year-old enhanced supervision so we can do the assessment to see where those individuals can eventually leave out of young adult ESH to go either to secure, second chance, or true.
Can I just
It is, but I think we're confusing everything here. We're not voting on the first variance. We keep going back to the 18-year-olds and
We're
criteria.
voting on the first variance.
That's-
That is what we're voting
But
on.
you're asking the distinction between the young adult ESH
No,
and
on
secure.
and secure. So I'm asking for the difference between the criteria for placement into the secure, which the board authorized without rulemaking based on your representations, with the criteria for placement in enhanced supervision, 19 to 21-year-old, with the adults. That's the distinction I was asking for.
So the condition that's been proposed here is related to look back, and the condition proposed is to limit look back to 1 year. The department has responded. Is there additional discussion amongst the board on the question of look back?
The only comment I would like to make is if it's about the current behavior, the look back is not an issue. And from what I understand, it sounds like it'll be about the current behavior of a slashing or some violent act that will put the 19 to 21-year-old into a situation where they could either be put in secure or enhanced supervision. And if that is the case, then the look back is not an issue because the immediate offense will be enough criteria and eligibility to be placed in EHS.
Question, do we have data at this point that as we consider this condition, we can look at and make a determination as to whether or not anything beyond a 1 year look back is necessary? You understand what I'm saying? What I'm asking you is that, when you look at those who have committed violent infractions that, were or were not in ESH or were not placed there, can you look and tell whether or not there's a pattern that we see concerning the, like past infractions that may help to inform this particular condition request?
I think the frequency of the violence would be a factor. The issues surrounding the prior incidents are all pieces, the gang involved or whatever so it's just more information that helps us make a better decision about this act that occurred. And, looking 5 years back is not unusual in our
So we don't want to risk being overly prescriptive, but I think what the board is focused on is having a process of look back that is judicious and appropriately weighs patterns of behavior, length of time since the last offense. And I think you're saying that it is that kind of a review where the look back itself is only one part of the review. So I'm going to call the question on the look back, whether I think our rules currently allow 5 years. Is that?
Yes.
So it would change that in this context to 1 year. All those in favor? That's 1, 2, 3. All opposed? Well, that doesn't matter. The condition does not pass. So those are the conditions. Now we have to vote on the amended variance request, which was amended from a 6-month period to 3-month period, I think with an acknowledgement that we will no doubt be discussing the general subject again 3 months from now. But be that as it may, the variance now reads as proposed by the board, as amended by the board, for a period of 3 months.
I'd like to clarify something, that we didn't go through the conditions that were already attached, so I want to make it clear that the conditions around approval for going into ESH by the chief or designee still holds.
They all hold.
And there were a series of reporting conditions associated with the old variance that's now up for a vote for renewal. Those reporting conditions are slightly modified in their format, but there still would be reporting conditions associated with the variance.
That is true. So all those in favor of the variance that has been requested with the amendment and with slightly modified conditions? All those in favor? Okay, that carries. Now we're going to return to the question of incorporating 18-year-olds into ESH program. And I'm going to just take advantage of my position as chair to see if I can crystallize this a bit. The department is asking for the inclusion of what they anticipate will be a very small number of 18-year-olds for whom the existing alternatives to ESH would not be optimally tied to safety and security, and that this ESH intervention would incorporate also a higher degree of assessment for these 18-year-olds. But the anticipated number is small, and it is seen as a tool by the department to better safeguard both the inmates in question and the population and staff of the facility. Is that a description of what it is that the department wants to do?
Yes.
Okay, now we're back to the discussion of the incorporation. It is it's not a new facility. It is an existing program. It is incorporating them with the 18 to 21, with the 19 to 21-year-olds, and not with adults above 21 years of age, below 22. Discussion.
So, if I may just begin. help me to appreciate the timing. Now that we've approved a variance of 3 months for the 19 to 21s to be commingled with the 22 and over, and now that and now moving on considering the 18-year-olds and an 18 to 21-year-old facility, help me to appreciate the timing.
So as we all understand, we were asking for a 6-month variance to basically extend ESH, but allow for the placement of the entire 18 to 21-year-old cohort in exceptional circumstances. Much as we've been doing over the last couple of months, as we've been trying to slowly move towards ending the use of 23-hour lock-in punitive SEG for this cohort, we've had to develop different options. That has taken time, as you all understand. We bear responsibility for kind of having to move down that route, but also wanting to do it safely and balancing the needs. Here, we have had an opportunity over time working with the board when we modified the punitive SEG. We started to limit the number and the types of violent infraction for which we would put in. We also instituted a structured level of programming, rec, and other things that got us to around 6 or so hours. In order to continue to move down that route, that housing unit proved relatively effective in that we had options before us. We could end punitive SEG with a 23-hour lockdown, but still had places to put people and enough of an ability to shift people around should, as the chief mentioned, something happen in secure where we originally thought that would be enough. Didn't prove to be the case, we need to move out. So the timing aspect of it is to basically, one, add the extra hour of programming to what we had already established. So we already have our feet under us a bit, creating this and working to develop a better program. We're now using it to better assess, because now we've been able to relate what we learned in that former punitive SEG area with secure, the type of assessment we would need to take into consideration, the type of separation that we may have to have happen. And so we are putting forth a variance to go 6 months with 18 to 21-year-olds in an ESH setting that would allow us to do the assessment, as Deputy Commissioner Jackson was mentioning, to put in place kind of any movement between secure and this young adult ESH, and ultimately be able to kind of say that we've got safe transitions across a different spectrum that both provide them continuous programming, which is a commitment on the department's end, as we've said in terms of the hours that we're trying to put in, but also a balance of security and safety to be able to move them around as necessary.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand. So we just approved a variance of 3 months for the 19 to 21 to be commingled with 22 and over. So you got that, but what you're saying is that you would immediately begin to move, if granted this variance, to create a unit for 18 to 21-year-olds, such that if you got that, then you would not be commingling the 19 to 21 with over 22.
So that is one thing. Right now, we don't know, as I think somebody asked, there is no 18-year-old currently in Jersey.
Right.
So admittedly, part of the timing of this as well is the fact that we don't have an 18-year-old. Should it happen, we want the variance in place to move in that, but we wouldn't actually have.
So the difference would be we got the current model, we're trying to develop a new model.
Right.
So at the end of the day, 6 months from now, we could say we're not going to use the first model because this other model is going to work better for us.
For the 18 to 21-year-olds. That's what I'm asking.
Correct.
Okay.
And the 4 that you have there, you could move into this new model.
Correct.
And Commissioner, can you talk about the program you laid out, the hours? How many hours of services will this new model receive?
So it's 4 hours of programming, 1 hour of rec, 2 hours in the day room, and that's 7 total hours. And within those 7 hours, you can go to school as well.
Within those hours, not additional?
Not additional.
I have a few questions. Can you talk to us a little bit? I just very recently heard about an assessment unit for young adults. Can you tell us what that assessment piece, which is what distinguishes this from enhanced supervision, what that will look like?
So I'm probably the last person that could explain that to you, but What's important for us is that most people, most of us, do not want to be violent. So we're trying to dive into the behaviors that drive the violence. The thing that Chief said about some of these young adults having to live up to their reputation, why they feel unsafe when they're mixed with other young adults that may be opposite gangs or have prior history. Once we get them in a safe environment, we're able to program and reach them in ways we're typically not able to do. So Lynette can talk about the assessment tool, and Dr. Adams can talk about the therapeutic one.
So some of the assessments that we're going to utilize from the very beginning include during this in this area would be the TABE, would also be the LSCMI, which is the Level Service Inventory, Case Management Inventory tool that talks about needs, really talks about needs holistically, looking at the young person from substance abuse, family, and a number of other different areas in which impact the challenge that that person is facing. In addition to that, we're also going to implement the relational tool that Vera created to really talk about family mapping or family support system, really looking at that young person holistically and creating a comprehensive assessment to figure out what are the needs, what are the circumstances that brought this person here, and how do we address that through programming, and how do we determine or identify the most suitable housing for that individual based on their needs.
So just so I understand, is this questioning, since it's enhanced supervision because these are persistently violent, dangerous, does that assessment also include safety and security needs related to their, whatever their violent activity was in the jail?
Yes. Anytime somebody commits a crime, there are a number of environmental assessments that are being done in terms of figuring out what was the issue with the, perpetrator, the victim, and a bunch of different things. So that's always done under all circumstances when something egregious occurs.
Okay, so let me just ask about that. I know at the last board meeting, Dr. Cohen and I asked for a list of the questions that you all use, like let's say at Brooklyn House, when you were trying to make those determinations. We didn't receive those list of questions, but can you tell me how this assessment respects and protects the constitutional rights of these young people? They are criminal defendants. They have lawyers assigned. They have a right not to incriminate themselves. So when you are asking them about the activity that's violent in nature, which tends to be criminal in the jail, as well as perhaps the actions that brought them, how do you not infringe on these constitutional
So
rights?
there's one thing I want to say, Judge. I'm not specifically focused on the environmental assessments. That happens across the board anytime there's an egregious act. The issue here in this unit is really focused on that person's individual developmental needs. So it's about violence triage. It's about what are those needs that brought them there. It's about who are their support systems. The regular security issues are security system that's utilized to figure out phone call monitoring. All of those environmental assessments will still be in place. But this is actually focusing on the person's individual and developmental needs that really focus on that person holistically. So we're not just saying this person committed a stabbing and now they go to a certain place. It's more about what happened here. What brought you into this? How long have you been in the system? Who are your support systems? How can we engage those support systems to support you while you're...
Right, but I know you said you're not focused on the environmental, but I believe, would this be the first time that the Board of Correction is being asked to essentially authorize an assessment piece that includes the environmental into restrictive housing?
Environmental assessments happen across the country in every correctional facility. So what I want to say is that is not the focus. That's what happens in every correctional facility across the country. We're not talking about the environmental assessments. We're talking about the developmental assessments that really address the needs of young people in terms of substance abuse, in terms of family, different things that will help us identify how we could support this young person through programming.
I don't think we're being asked to approve an assessment, but we're being asked to approve the inclusion of 18-year-olds in the ESH. We don't normally, I don't think, try to regulate how the department operates in regard to assessing the needs of inmates. I think that's part of the description of what they're going to do, but it's not a part of what's before us.
In terms of what we're being asked, the ESH was set up as a unit not for instant offenses, but for the department to place people who it believed who were no longer in solitary confinement, to place them in a unit based upon something that they had done during the time that they were in prison, or the time with up to 5 years prior to being in prison, to keep these people in a separate housing area, not because of what they had done, specifically not that. You identify them at the time as the worst of the worst. That's what the news stories that the department put out for it. But it was not a unit for instant infractions. The department set up the secure unit as a place for when people have severe infractions. I think right now it's inadequate in terms of the amount of space in it. It was designed in a hurry, and it's not what you would like it to be. There probably needs to be another secure unit where you can put people, just as you described initially, when they are released. As you start a secure unit, you put one person in a 4 to 8 person cell in secure, and it worked out. And you could do that now if you set up additional secure units. Setting up another unit which does not require a special, and this is a separate unit, I believe the department is talking about creating a new kind of unit, which is an assessment unit for the population who are 18 to 21, which people will enter for various reasons that we're not that clear of right now, but is really like rulemaking. When we first heard about ESH, it was a similar kind of problem, and the law department and our council said this is a process that requires rulemaking that should not be done under a variance. I appreciate that this is worthwhile discussion, but it should not be something that the board does under this circumstances right now.
I understand, Dr.
Before
Cohen.
you answer that, let's just nail this one aspect down. Is this a new unit, or is this incorporating 18-year-olds into existing ESH? It's become an
I
important
understand.
question.
I think that I want to be clear, and it's probably a little nuanced than it should be, but it incorporates 18-year-olds into ESH. However, we want to address the fact that there are 18 to 21-year-olds, so the combination of programs would be different than in the adult ESH. So I'm sorry that might be a little more nuanced than necessary, because it's not a new unit. It is an incorporation of 18 into there, but we would at least provide a bit of different structure and programming into it because of the age cohort.
I appreciate that, Jeff. I think the answer to both questions is yes, right? There are new elements to an existing program that we want to add for 18 to 21-year-olds, right? And I appreciate that, and I agree with you, Bobby. I think this is a new sort of thing that we should go into rulemaking on, but it shouldn't prevent us from addressing today's request, right?
Exactly
Let me just finish, right? It shouldn't stop us from addressing today's request, and I appreciate today's request, right? Because it is talking about being nuanced and being responsive in a very thoughtful way with young people about where they're placed and how we can support them so they don't go back through that. I appreciate that. The second piece I'd like to add.
Stanley, I want to hold on that first point, because it's not clear that, to me anyway, that this requires rulemaking. As I understand it, the secure unit was created by Variance. Is that not correct? Does anyone know?
That's correct.
That's correct. So I'm not sure that there's any strong argument. Maybe desirable, but there's no requirement that.
And Chair, I would just like to also add that we're not taking away programming, we're adding. So in terms of how you look at this and as a variance and the need for rulemaking, it isn't something that we're removing, we're only enhancing.
And I wanted to request, can we add the education piece? Because the first request was we couldn't do it because you had them with adults and it would be, some would get it and some wouldn't. Now that we're saying let's go 18 to 21, can we add the education piece as part of the programming? Not in...
And if you could clarify, education was always included, whoever's speaking to this point. Education wasn't excluded. The question was whether or not education would be outside of the 7 hours.
Exactly. And that's what I'm requesting.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to say in all candor, I've been chairing adolescent and young adult committee for 3 years. I've been very careful about all the restrictive units. I'm very well versed in all of them. In my opinion, this is authorizing a new type of unit. The rulemaking we did for enhanced supervision was regarding adults. It was not with respect to regarding young adults. So young adults being placed there was not considered for rulemaking. When the commissioners initially sought a variance for enhanced supervision, we got an opinion from the legal department, and the opinion was it would constitute improper rulemaking to consider it. In this case, we have different aspects being added. We'd have to consider the criteria for the young adults for a new unit. We'd have to, adding the 18-year-olds I don't see as an issue. They could certainly ask to add them to the current one that exists. But in my opinion, before we would move forward on this variance, I believe someone from the law department is here, as well as general counsel. I'd like an opportunity for us to confer with our counsel as to whether or not this would be improper rulemaking. Again, much of this isn't specified in the variance, so it's based on what they're representing here today.
I just wanted to clarify, because it came up twice, that you were unclear of what the eligibility criteria is. The eligibility criteria is stabbing, slashing, serious injury to staff, and serious injury to their peers. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of what the eligibility criteria for this unit is. Right now, we have 4 young people.
And just if I can respond to that, that's exactly what the law department told us, and I spoke with them directly about why it would constitute improper rulemaking, because the board would be deciding the criteria that's separate and distinct from the enhanced supervision. Could we just
We will confer.
Okay,
yes.
we're gonna, we'll take a 5-minute break and confer with counsel and the law department as to what is involved here. So the meeting is called to order. Thank you for your patience. It was a bit more than 5 minutes. We still have some substantive things to discuss in relation to the proposed variance, but it does seem that we can move forward in considering this variance. So again, I'm going to use the format of having the variance moved and seconded, and have, for the record, discussion after that. And is there a second? Second. It's moved and seconded, open for discussion, the inclusion of 18-year-olds in ESH with criteria that have been stated. Discussion?
Discussion questions. Is the department willing to add the equal hours to programming that we have in secure in this particular unit, meaning that the hours for education will be in addition to the hours already articulated by Commissioner Winnett, and adding the hours from secure? So what you have is enhanced supervision for 18 to 21-year-olds with programming that looks like secure, which has been showing solid results, where you can get your assessments and all of those things. Great.
So you're putting that forth as
We're putting it, we're willing to consider it, because what we would do is create an incentivized approach for it.
Yeah,
however we ended up, but if we ended up with the hours being the same, so yes.
Just to be clear, the hours out of cell and secure were up to 14 hours. ESH is a 7-hour unit. So you're agreeing to consider 14
14
hours as
hours.
the program that you, not consider that there will be 14 hours available?
No, sir. Secure, when you initially go, is a 10-hour lockout. So through incentives and passing through different phases, you can earn additional time lockout. So by the time you leave, you would be at 14. So,
And here in this, we would basically allow for earning up to 10 with the education if they get to it.
right. So as part of an incentive, we can do that. In addition to that, we can, if young people meet the criteria and are showing promise in the young adult ESH, we can move them to secure so they could have the 10 hours and go through the process.
Have the 14, right?
No. No.
Through incentives and secure, you said.
No. So you're saying, so if a young person ends up in young adult ESH, we can create an incentivized process that they can earn additional hours out. Like you mentioned, you earn time out to do something constructive. So education can be one of those things. But don't forget, what I'm trying to say is that initially you can be assessed and moved into secure because you meet the criteria, and we found that the assessments, the comprehensive profile tells us it's a safe and effective placement for you. So you would be automatically eligible for the 10 initially.
Right. But what I was just focused on is EHS. Will they be eligible for those 10 hours there? And
So they will be eligible for 10 hours with as an incentive based. It was not an immediate, you get 7 hours of programming, as you can earn, you can use
additional 3 hours.
Additional 3 hours, yes, of programs.
Perfect.
Additional discussion?
Yeah, I do. So there's been a lot of conversation about this. In your opinion, was all this reduced to writing in the variance that was presented to us that flushes all this out?
Sorry.
All the information that you're providing to us today, well, maybe you'll agree with me that this was not all in the variance request that you submitted to the Board of Correction late last week, correct?
No, the variance request was focused on extending and creating the 18 to 21-year-old as currently defined with ESH. So we're talking with you, given your concerns, to kind of address some of those issues. The education piece is something that's been brought up here, and so we're addressing it here.
So I just want to say, I've been chairing this committee for 3 years, and I believe it's a little disingenuous to say that you need a new unit that's going to have different criteria placement, different reviews, different programming, without at least the chair of this committee being better informed before today. I believe, it's my opinion, it's my impression that even though the Board of Correction standards do not require 18-year-olds to be separated from 19, 20 to 21, and we could certainly authorize the commingling with adults. And the Nunez consent judgment does not specifically require they be separated because the monitor would prefer the 18-year-olds to be separated to ensure compliance. So you're essentially seeking us to authorize what, in my opinion, would be a substantially new and different unit that it includes an assessment piece. So I will just state, I am opposed to this unit. I think it constitutes improper rulemaking. I don't believe the parties that have spoken, that have attended, that have been given adequate notice as to what this unit would look like and how it really operates. And I don't feel I've been given substantial information upon which to make a sound decision. It's based on, to a great extent, representations, not documentation and paperwork.
Other comments?
Question?
Yes.
Do we add the criteria that Commissioner Winnett laid out in terms of the immediate act, or is that because she said that what will get somebody in this unit is a stabbing, assault on staff, or assault, or some violent act? Is that in the variance, or do we need to add that as a condition?
No, so I guess, as we had said before, we asked for the variance to include within ESH because ESH gave us a minimum standard by which we would comply. We expanded upon that, and we can do by policy just the different criteria to kind of make them more exclusive insofar, so that we can provide that. But we don't need that from our rulemaking. That's just something that we can make by policy because it's above and beyond what you've granted us with ESH.
So in a sense, the criteria are not changing as.
You're just adding a
Where do we anticipate this will all lead us to? Will we end up, and I don't know if it's 3 months, 6 months, 6 years for that matter, but will we end up in a position where you will have an ESH unit that has 18 to 21-year-olds in it? And is that where this all ends up? And then that unit is a permanent unit? Or
yeah, I think we want to remember that, with the vote the board just took with the variance to allow us, we ended punitive seg as a practice for 18 to 21-year-olds. So in terms of one goal, ending a practice for 18 to 21-year-olds within this department, we've now done that. And what we are looking for continuously is an ability to safely manage those who are our most violent offenders, even within this age group. Because we don't want to use punitive segregation as it was, we need alternatives. And as we move forward, and this is why these are variances that will ultimately lead to a rulemaking, we need the opportunity to kind of ensure that we've got the options in place. So when we do go with a fuller rulemaking, all the options will be represented.
so you anticipate then an 18 to 21-year-old ESH unit on a permanent basis? That's my question.
That's the current thinking, but we are asking for a variance to take a look at it.
So without the variance, where does the 18-year-old now go?
So right now, the situation that the chief described would occur. So right now, they go to secure. And we have had incidents where that need for a placement in a more secure setting to kind of provide them the programming and then move them into secure. So right now, they go into secure.
And then you are seeing disruption within secure. That then you're saying it then unravels a lot that you've already done. Can you say more on that?
Exactly. So what happens is someone who is at this level comes in where everybody's now in the middle or at baseline, and it creates a situation where everyone becomes fearful. People start to discuss ways in which they'll hurt one another because so-and-so is here and they can't be seated next to so-and-so. So we have a lot of, one thing that I keep saying is that we have to listen to young people when they speak. So when young people tell me, I'm going to hurt so-and-so because you bring him here, this is what's going to happen, I have to listen, because our job is to keep both the population and our staff safe. So that's what happens now.
That same thing could happen in ESH. You could have people commingling them, and
Yes.
the personal chemistry is
Yes, but right now I only have secure as an option. So it will always happen if I don't have other options. You see the difference? The difference is if I have an option,
You got true.
true does not deal with individuals who are doing, it's very different. It's not as egregious as what we're talking about here.
I don't see the difference, because you could very well have a situation where you have two people, both of whom slash someone, and they need to go to ESH, but they have a personal history among themselves, where you're getting the same problem again, where you can't commingle them. So
there's an option, but I have options now. Right now, I don't have any option. It's just secure.
Right, and so you put them both in the ESH, but wouldn't you have the same problem?
You also have alternate lockout in ESH, correct?
Exactly. I have
So they
alternate
have-
lockout.
Correct.
Yeah, and I also have an option. It's ESH or secure. There's an option.
A couple of questions. Have you, in light of what you've noted as a deficiency in secure, have you looked to revise any of the protocol regarding secure? And two, there was supposed to be another secure unit developed and in place so that would mitigate against that. What's happened with that plan?
That plan is still in place. The issue is that, again, what we're learning is it's becoming a place where a high level of programming is happening. And like I said, when you put someone in that committed an egregious crime as such that I discussed earlier, it disrupts those who are doing well. I mean, this really just provides an option for young people and to really help them and also create a more therapeutic option for them. But, you know.
What's your census in secure right now?
Census today is 11.
11, and in EH
4.
4, right?
Not ESH.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the staffing to offender ratio in the ESH?
So are you talking about the current young adult ESH?
With the 19 to 21-year-old, what's the staffing ratio to?
So with the 19 to 21, can somebody remind me?
2 officers on the floor plus the escort.
Yeah.
Okay, and in the secure housing unit, what's the ratio there? Approximately, staff to?
Pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same. So, but you're saying about 11, right, in the secure housing, okay? And you have 2 officers in that? 3?
Not in every quad, but 2 officers in each day room and then
But I'm talking about the
escorts
secure
circling
housing.
around. Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Quads.
Okay, so your ability, I guess, your ability to separate those folks in ESH is a little higher, a little better to be able to do, or less likely to do? Because that goes back to the question over here, when you have separatees, for example.
Right.
Right? Now, do you have the ability to separate these?
So we'll have the ability because we have 2 different times of lockout,
Okay.
7 and 7, but we'll also have the ability, if there are 2 people involved in an issue, one can go to secure today while we program that person, and then one can stay in the young adult ESH and we can program that person.
So you have, this is basically an option. It provides a management option for another housing area to place somebody if you have separatees.
Yes.
Basically, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay, thank you.
Again, the department told us that they were going to build 64 beds of secure housing. There were going to be 2 units, 8 units in each of them, 4 units in each of them, 8 separate units, each of which could house 8 people. You now have how many in secure? 11. You know, out of the 60 you said, if you had built as you described, you would have many more. In terms of the options for management, each of these units has 4 separate housing areas, each of the secure units. So there are 8 completely separate units, whereas in ESH, there's just, you're either locked in your cell or you're not. Here, there's 8 day rooms as planned for secure. Now we're being told that there's no possibility of separation. It's not true. You're just creating a new unit, which is going to have less time out of cell, and there's not a basis for it. And additionally, ESH allows you to put people in based upon stuff they did when they were 14 years old. And you've specifically asked, not to approve, Judge Hamill's request that you not have look back going that far. I don't think there's any need for this for us to establish new units, which is what you are asking us for today. So I'm going to vote no on this proposal.
So
I have two other questions, actually.
Okay.
Okay, part of the young adult strategy change has been realizing that some young people are more violent with other young people, and realizing that there can be a calming effect on young people mixed with adults, which is why you've got your blended population units, since secure and enhanced supervision is for the most dangerous and violent, persistently violent. Why would you not why would you want to create a separate unit to put all of those really dangerous, violent young people together instead of commingling them with the adults the same way you are doing in the blended population housing?
So we're doing that, Judge, as you know, but the issue is, I think that everybody's missing is we're trying to do more for young people in the YA ESH. We're trying to do more assessments. We're trying to create a comprehensive profile. We don't want to do a knee-jerk reaction and move somebody a place because they had a fight. We want to be able to really have this opportunity to meet and talk and figure out and assess what the issues are before placement. So that's the main need.
I just have one last question.
Please. Sure.
Can you tell me, in fact, whether there have been any metrics designed and any evaluations or assessments of your various restrictive units? True, shoe, secure, and enhanced supervision.
I'm glad you asked that. So we have done some preliminary preliminary analysis. In addition to that, we're working with the monitors to really look at how do we best and effectively manage this population, but also operationalize the unit.
So do you have anything in writing you could present to us?
I can't present anything to you at this time.
Okay. And when we talk about options, you do in fact have 3 young adults unless you've moved them in NYC, which is pretty restrictive, and you do have 3 young adults in West facility, correct?
I believe you're going to talk about West shortly.
But there are young adults in other units that are restrictive.
That is not what I'm trying to create.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the proposed variance to include 18-year-olds in ESH signify by raising your hand.
With the conditions of the incentive and the criteria for getting it.
Yeah, and they will report back on the incentive. Oh, I think the
How long is the variance? 6 months?
6 months,
6 months.
6 years.
Well, I think for that to happen, that they'd have to confirm that ESH was in fact a permanent program for 18 years. I do think this is one we might end as a variance. All those opposed? For the record. Motion
May I
carries.
state one thing, Stan?
Yes,
I
of course.
just want to state I feel constrained at this point to resign as chair of the Adolescent Young Adult Committee. I was not aware of the strategy change. I was not aware you were going to be asking for a new unit to the extent you are at this point, and I'll be happy to turn it over to my colleagues. Thank you. I don't want any comment on it by the Department of Corrections.
So I do think, though, there is, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope we will be able to persuade you otherwise. But there are CAPA rules about the submission of variances and timeframes. But beyond the CAPA rules, something as substantive as this question, and you can see from the discussion by the board members, more time to consider, discuss, evaluate, interact with the department would have been much better, and I think made it easier for all of us to resolve the important issues that were discussed today in a somewhat more rushed manner. The next item on the agenda is the West facility. Let me kick that off by alluding to the communication that the board sent to the department around important issues relating to non-compliance with standards and particular concerns about segments of the population, including the SMIs. We haven't heard formally from the department on the West facility, so we'd like to hear from the department how they are responding to the letter of violation and what steps they are taking and what progress they are making toward achieving compliance.
So, as the board knows, we thank you. We've been working with the board collaboratively on this and trying to provide some options. We put forth a variance request For those that we were housing within the West facility, broken down into two categories. Those were who are persistently violent, who present an extreme danger to other inmates for whom they might interact, as well as those who are in an extensive protective custody status for which there is a danger to the inmate themselves from other attacks, either targeted by other individuals or because they have a certain notoriety because of some of the crimes that they've committed. And we have proposed that we would provide all of their services within a modified alternative approach, providing due process for those who are placed in. We've gone through and also taken a review of the people and moved people out as well. We've worked with the board and with H&H for those that were identified as SMI. There was an exception for which we asked some time to develop a further plan with H&H, and we're still pending that. H&H is working on kind of a safe housing for that person. But in a nutshell, that is as our proposal for addressing some of these issues and moving forward.
Well, just, first to say, the department has been aware for a long time that the board is concerned about serious violations of the minimum standards at West facility. The board staff prepared a report that we were going to have an agenda item in July. They identified the fact that there was serious problems in access to care for the mentally ill there, that people did not have access to law library, that people were being locked up all day long, 23 hours a day by themselves for extended periods of times forever without any basis as to why they were there. And to receive on Friday evening your variance requests when you got a letter from us a month ago identifying all of these issues, which could have allowed you to respond, saying that we knew you were in violation. We did not issue a formal violation, but we wrote you a letter clearly identifying these things, and if there to be no response in terms of requesting variances at that point, and then to send on Friday afternoon. Fortunately, the board, I believe, has agreed not to consider your request for variances, and just for you to understand that you're in serious violation of multiple standards, and hope to, as soon as possible, that you cure these violations and not ask for variances to allow, for example, these men in West facility who have serious charges and are facing trials. That's why they're there. They can't get bail, and they're facing serious charges, to have access to kiosks right now. That was raised in our concern 6 months ago, almost 6 months ago. You've known about it forever. You can do that. I believe you have the capacity to escort people wherever you need to escort them. And I would hope that one of the things you would tell us today is that all the men in West facility who request kiosk access, they're all facing charges. I don't believe any of them are sentenced at this point. Be provided that starting now. Is that be possible?
Yeah, we can provide absolutely.
You can send them to kiosks at other facilities now. Okay.
Yeah, our concern has been with the congruent service, the congruent nature of some of these services because of the security aspect. But what we've tried to identify are the services would be provided, and we'll work with the board on kind of the safety measures that come with the interactions that may happen with other inmates.
So they will be able to get to kiosks?
Yes.
What is the department doing with security of those facilities? When I went out there, the cameras aren't working. For the officers, I see the A officer is totally blind from the B officer unless him or her comes out of the sort of bubble because the cameras don't work. Those facilities just seem like they are not in good shape for inmates or officers. So what is the department doing with it?
I'll let the chiefs speak more specifically, but essentially all of our facilities aren't necessarily the best design for some of these. So we're
there are no cameras there. Right? There are no cameras in West facility.
For the inmates that need extra supervision, we put extra staff into those areas. A lot of the reasons for some of these inmates, it's more or less other inmates trying to get at them, or they're trying to get the others. So therefore, extra staffing for that purpose is not so much necessary as more with the violent inmates that's in those areas.
Yeah. It sounds strange,
And
but
then
I'm
we
really
also
asking
put a
a
hand-
question about the officers. Because I went out there and the officers, they're totally like blind. Like the A officer literally does not know what's going on unless they hear a scream or unless they come out of the bubble because none of the cameras work.
I don't know about any screams, but I do know that the officers, before they open up doors, that they communicate with each other. I mean, I go through those areas consistently, and I ask each and every staff member for any concerns. And I've toured those areas several times with your board members, and they could attest to it that I reach out to each and every inmate in there, and I look for and I ask for any kind of concerns that they may have. For the most part, they just want to be pretty much left alone.
I'm not exactly, well, thank you for that, I'm sorry. There are no cameras in West Facility as far as I could tell. There used to be monitors in the cells. Those have all been removed. People are brought over to West Facility. I don't know if everybody who's come to this meeting is aware. People are brought to West Facility without a charge. There's no, they're not brought there because they're told they've done something. They have not, they're not given the ability to appeal their movement there. They're not, and there's no endpoint. And they're essentially all locked in 23 hours a day. People complain to me about access to religious services. One of the prisoners was asked if he could get communion, was told that he couldn't. And the legal thing, I guess you've settled now, although you could have settled that a long time ago, and you were aware of it. You've asked us for 60 days, which we're not considering today. I would hope that you would have something to ask us in terms of a due process, which we could receive immediately, or tomorrow, or next week. The notion that it's going to take you 60 days to figure out how we should make some decision about this.
Sorry, sir. Just so you know, as part of the thing, we would immediately move forward with due process. We just needed time to kind of get the forms together, make sure it was actually kind of structured in a way. We asked for time to kind of finish it, not necessarily to kind of start it. So, and then second, we would also, I think, as people have been saying, we'll put handheld cameras for any movement of inmates within the West facility to kind of ensure that there is at least some coverage.
I must say, not having cameras in this facility was disturbing to me. Are you going to keep SMI prisoners in this area as you have? Are you going to keep young adults in this area? There's an 18-year-old who's in there right now who can't get school.
For the SMI first, obviously, we will do everything we can to not place any SMI in that area. If there is ever a reason for a security reason and SMI is in there, it is in full consultation with H&H.
So H&H has agreed to have the SMI persons there? I'm disappointed if that's the case. It's very disappointing.
I just want to make sure that there is a current example where we need time to develop the appropriate plans. We don't agree that it's the best place for an SMI, but in terms of security, to move them to a different and better location, we've agreed to the fact that we may have to place them there in the interim.
Thank you. So we are all in agreement that the West facility is not an appropriate housing area for persons with serious mental illness. We do, however, currently not have a CAPS style unit that really is dedicated and sufficient for people who have serious mental illness but really have behavioral problems that are associated with persistent aggression, and that is a clinical unit, that is not a punishment unit or a high security unit. We actually are in the middle, Dr. Ford, Dr. Barbara Rioja, and Chief Canty, in planning the development and opening in very short order of a new CAPS unit that will be an AMKC that will in fact have high levels of clinical engagement. We'll have extra officer staffing, extra clinical staffing for patients who are SMI, but who also have behavioral concerns that have led to security concerns. And these are the patients that have been consigned to the West facility inappropriately, but in large measure because we don't have an appropriate unit for them. We're developing that, and we will open that very soon. And I think that we have a walkthrough of a unit today or tomorrow of the clinical staff at AMKC. We know where it's going to go. We have to figure out how to get the staff in there. All the clinical staff are hired actually for this unit, and it's a matter of identifying and training security staff and health staff together for that.
I appreciate that, and I hope that you'll keep us informed about that. What is the current mental health staffing and medical staffing for this unit? When
Sorry,
we looked
for-
there a number of months ago, it was not
For the
quite
West
good.
facility?
Yeah.
We have a mental health unit chief there. We have clinical staff who are there. The concern there is that because the whole construct of this place is security, it's that we could triple the amount of staff there we have, but they're not going to have meaningful interactions. And so that is why we have put upon ourselves the burden of quickly opening this new CAPS unit so that we can have meaningful interactions with the health staff. We could have the best psychologists and psychiatrists in the world, but if they're talking through the door, that's not going to really help better outcomes for the security staff and for the patient. And so we have plenty of staff there to do what they can do now, but that's not the point. The point is we need to get this new unit open so we can have more meaningful engagement.
Thank you.
So, given the complexity of the issues and the board's concerns about conditions at the West facility, I believe that we're, as a board, not prepared to entertain and adequately discuss and decide upon the variance request. And I'm going to ask the board to table the variance request in anticipation of a special meeting between now and the next meeting. We recognize the importance of the issues. We share the concern of the department in assuring the safety of staff and inmates, but the enormity of the questions and frankly the non-compliance with standards up to this point, the fact that SMIs have been kept in that facility clearly require real thought and discussion on the part of the board. So we will be scheduling in short order a meeting to consider the variances and to have fuller discussions on how such a secure facility will work. Attention to special populations like the SMIs, due process, access to services. It requires, I think, a dedicated forum, and it also will give some real opportunity to advocates and others who, like the board, receive the variance only on Friday. So I'm going to ask for a motion to table this variance.
So moved.
And a second. All those in favor, we will schedule a meeting. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We had some other items, but this has been a full meeting, and we have another.
No, I didn't. I didn't. But it's there. This is not secure. It has all these different places. It's not. It's with two officers in each one. Staffing, plus officers have signs, so it's huge. You know, where ESH is not.
Well, it's late.
And there's the-
I'm not going to eliminate the public comment period, but I am going to hold people very strictly to a 2-minute period of comment, and I mean that. So I will begin the public comment public comment period. If I can read the names, Liz Mayers.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. That wins the award. The first three people are not speaking? Yeah. Okay.
Dale Wilker's listed again. But he already-
Just a brief comment on the West facility. This is a pure rule of law issue as far as the Legal Aid Society is concerned. Jackson versus Horn established that there can be no exceptions to the requirement of the board for lockout time, except punitive segregation and for contagious disease patients. The department is in clear violation of that. I would urge the board to take immediate action to enforce its city rule and order the department to today cease and desist the use or the lock-in for 23 hours a day of these inmates and provide them with the full lockout opportunities to which they're entitled. What I heard in terms of some of this discussion about protective custody and other types of inmates there, and particularly seriously mentally ill, seems to make very little sense whatsoever. The department did this unilaterally without any consultation, knowing it was in violation of the rules. I can't imagine that in a department with 11,000 inmates that they don't have other places to put people like they have before, and that the board should take a definitive action to stop this practice today. Legal action in court if necessary.
All right. D. Cole. Don't see D. Cole. Mick Kincaid. Nick's not here. Kay Grace Price.
Good morning. I'm sorry, Mick Kincaid had to leave, but he had a few concerns that he'd like me to express for him. Our viewpoints, as you know, usually ally. We're horribly concerned that we still haven't heard anything about the rape and sexual assault plan that was introduced in a very rough draft format last spring. Mick is particularly concerned that the public comment period has ended, even though your consideration of the rule has still extended, and we're hoping that you can extend the public comment period and still accept comments and share with us the updated timeline for the rape and sexual assault prevention plan. I want to talk specifically about numbers. Local Law 30 was voted by the City Council in April of 2015, mandating that the Department of Correction post on its website on July 1st annually the numbers of rapes and sexual assaults on the island in our city jails, broken down demographically, broken down by inmate on inmate versus staff or CO on inmate. Those numbers were posted ephemerally on July 1st. They've been taken down. What happened to those numbers? You're not in compliance with Local Law 33. I'm sorry, not the board, but whoever's left from the department. I see one note taker in the back. You're no longer in compliance with Local Law 33. What's going on with the numbers? What do we know about the numbers of rapes and sexual assaults from Rikers Island in the last 3 years? We know from the Public Advocates Amicus Brief that was introduced last year that in 2014, at the Rosen Singer Center alone, there were 116 reported rapes or sexual assaults. That's just from Rosie's. We know in 2015 that there were 155 alleged rapes or sexual assaults. Those numbers came out very piecemeal as well. We know that in 2016, up until May 26th, when Councilman Corey Johnson demanded to know how many rapes and sexual assaults had occurred this year, we know that we got the number of 188. And that we don't know if that is up until May 26th or the first quarter of 2016. Regardless of how you split these numbers, and I'll turn my comments with all of this documented in the footnotes into the board, regardless of how you split the numbers, we have either a 200 or 400% ramping up of rape and sexual assault complaints and reports over the last 2 or 3 years. Would really like to have those numbers solidified and published so that we can show everyone that this problem is not going away. We heard Richard Deering from the City Law Department stand at 40 Center Street and argue on August 16th of this year that the rape and sexual assault crisis had been cured by the city. Of course, the City Law Department is going to say that when trying to defeat the class motion objectives of the Jane Does, but we know from these numbers that are ephemeral and tertiary that this issue is not going away. You know the reason that I scream about this and that I've been here now for 2 years. I, like you, am unpaid. Nobody pays me to come to these meetings. Nobody pays me to do this work. I do it because I am a survivor who was ignored and cast aside and told that what happened to me didn't happen to me. And I know that this keeps happening continuously to the women, the girls, the boys, and the men on Rikers Island that have been cast aside by society and thrown there for whatever reason. I'm asking you, please include us in your preparations and in your planning. We're here, we're capable, we contribute, we've introduced you to savvy specialists, we've made suggestions. I believe that we've been begging the board to consider the Human Rights Watch evidence-based approach to rape and sexual assault. There's a myriad of resources available to the board. We'd like to continue to participate in this conversation with you. And hopefully within the next month, we can at least begin to establish a timeline as to how we're moving forward. It feels very much to us, and I know that I've exceeded my 3 minutes, it feels very much to us like the PREA rule that was floated last spring was specifically floated so that the City Law Department could stand up and argue that it had a plan to cure the rape and sexual assault crisis. Now that those motion arguments are over, it doesn't feel like anything is happening. I'd really like to know who's in charge of the Department of Correction. Is it the City Law Department at 100 Church Street, or is it the Board of Correction at 1 Center Street? We'd like to know. Thank you.